Hey everyone and welcome to another video. So today we're going to be covering itemization and item theory. Now, this has been a video I've wanted to do for a long time because I see it all too often where you guys are queue into your game, you pick your champion, and then you just load up pro builds and you blindly follow a build. Whether it's from a pro player, from a streamer, or whatever reason, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're blindly following a build that really concerns me because you need to understand why a certain item is strong on that champion in that specific instance and how it actually impacts the way you play the lane. So I'm hoping by the end of this video, you're going to be able to adapt your own builds, create your own builds, really understand how it affects you play the laning phase, and really understand how just raw stats work, like lethality, magic pen, percent penetration, healing reduction, lifesteal, resistances, how all of these things actually work. And yes, guys, some items are getting reworked, but that doesn't really matter because this is mainly going to be about why items are picked, how they actually work. So if you understand the underlying theory, the underlying stats behind it, then even if the items get reworked in the future, you're going to really understand, okay, understand why this is built, why this isn't built, why it's built in this particular order. So diving straight ahead, this is the contents. There's a lot of things we got to cover today. If you want to skip to a certain section, feel free, but we need to begin with item theory. So just like runes, guys, there is no just one set item path or objectively one best build. It changes game to game. You need to assess all of these factors, and once you understand the items, how they work, and consider all of these factors, you'll be able to optimize your build accordingly. So these are the factors that I think about every single game. I think about the game pace. Is it getting played really fast or really slow? How are people itemizing on both teams? Are they building a lot of defensives, or are they largely just building a lot of damage in which they're going to be very squishy? What is my role in that specific composition? Am I largely a diver and my role is to kill the enemy backline or the enemy AD carry, or am I there to shred the front line? How are fights actually getting played out? Are they getting played out relatively fast, burst oriented, or are they getting played out very slow, long extended fights where I'm just mainly playing front to back? I don't know, changes game to game. And lastly, how you interpret your champion's identity. As we all know, there are a lot of champions in the game that can be played a lot of differing ways. I can play a specific champion front to back like Twist of Fate, or I can dive the backline. It really just depends on how I interpret or how you interpret that specific champion's identity. And my goal by the end of this video, guys, is for all of you to know how to adapt your build in every single game, create specific or unique build paths, correctly itemize for your main champions, and exploit the weaknesses in the enemy build. So this is going to be an incredibly important video, guys. Now, Dorians Blade is actually quite effective during those early all-in burst-oriented trades due to its level of durability and solid amount of AD. So if you're looking to take those aggressive trades at level 2, level 3, level 4, this 80 HP and base 8 attack damage can really come in handy. Now, the main thing we need to understand with this item is that the healing is only relevant if you are attacking constantly. But what does this mean, guys? It means that you are most likely going to be pushing, which is a very high risk strategy. Because if you're pushing all the time as a mid laner, then you're going to be making yourself very vulnerable or heavily relying on wards or an aggressive jungler on your team, which isn't always the case. So if you're looking to freeze, play the lane relatively slow, not really attack the wave too much, then you're not going to get too much value from Dorians Blade, which means this is a high risk item, and in my opinion is probably one of the weakest early starting items for mid laners out there. Now, something you probably know intuitively is that high lifesteal, is more impactful later on the game, because in the early portion of the game, you're just not doing enough damage to warrant getting any meaningful healing from 3% lifesteal. But because it is such a decent scaling stat, you want to be ideally holding onto your Dorians Blade. So that's why you see when you see a Yasuo, ideally they should be holding onto their first Dorians Blade or even second Dorians Blade for as long as possible. But what's the cost of this? Well, the cost of this is that now your inventory is clogged. So let's say you're Yasuo, you're sitting on your 2 Dorians Blade, you're going to have your 3rd slot for your Berserker Greaves, then you're going to be building towards your Phantom Dancer. Now, if you're building, your daggers, maybe you got your Zeal, whatever it is, you also need a slot for pink wards. Now you can already start to see that your inventory is going to get clogged incredibly fast, and you want to be holding on to it as long as possible, and especially once you start building IE and things like that, it's going to be very hard for you to hold on to these items. So it's a bit of a catch-22 when building this item. Now, it's also decent in matchups where you outrange. So if you're playing something like Lucian into a very low range champion, or Callista mid into a very low range champion, then it can be quite decent because you're just straight up outranging. You get quite a lot of value from the lifesteal, and the 80 HP makes you quite durable, because a lot of the champions that, or the way assassins or a lot of champions, mages trade into champions like Lucian or Callista, they're going to go for very burst-oriented trades where the HP really comes in handy. And for obvious reasons, Dorians Blade synergizes quite well with Overheal, especially when it comes to mid to late game when you're holding onto it. Overheal can be quite good in the early lane with Lucian and Callista, especially when you're severely outranging, but it's mainly for mid to late game. Now for Cull, guys. So Cull is best when you want to take the early lane relatively slow. There's no aggressive all-in trades. There's no aggressive oriented burst trades. You really just want to farm up and play for your first key item spike. Now, something that is very misunderstood about Cull is that it actually provides more healing, more effective healing per attack comparatively to Dorians Blade. So if you actually look at the stats here, Cull has +3 life on hit, whereas Dorians Blade has +3% lifesteal. So if you actually do the math and look at the amount of damage you're doing with Dorians Blade in the early game, you actually get more effective healing with Cull, which means if you're taking if you're having a very slow, drawn out, extended laning phase, where there's really not much burst oriented trades going on, you get a lot more value from Cull, and you can actually sustain much better with Cull. But yes, obviously the downside, you don't have the HP that you would have otherwise had with Dorians Blade, but if you don't necessarily need that HP because it's a very slow lane, there's not much burst going on, then Cull might be for you. Now, one other thing with Cull that you need to understand is that it actually synergizes very well with Cutdown. Because Cull doesn't give any HP, if you're playing a champion with a very low base HP amount, you can actually activate Cutdown from level 1. So the way Cutdown works, you need at least a minimum of 10% HP difference. So say, for example, 500 HP versus 550 HP, you actually get plus 5% more damage at all times, which can be really, really good, especially over the entirety of a whole entire early laning phase. Now, that's why it's perfect for a champion like Corki. Now, Corki is obviously a ranged champion, so they have lower base HP. Now, in matchups where you're playing, say, Corki versus Katarina, or Corki versus Kiana, or basically Corki versus any melee champion, you're going to be able to proc Cutdown from level 1, even if they don't start Dorians Blade, just because of the raw difference in base HP. So this is something to think about. It is a little bit risky, but if you understand your matchups very well, then it can be a very niche way to get a bit of extra damage on your early trades. So now for Dorians Shield, guys. So one of the biggest advantages of Dorians Shield over, say, an item like Dorians Blade is that it really doesn't require you to shove the lane for sustain, right? Because as Dorians Shield, you can sit back, you can manage the wave however you need, and you get your regeneration from taking damage. You don't need to always push the wave to actually make use of a certain type of lifesteal. So that's actually one of the biggest advantages of Dorians Shield, and why it's actually such a reliable or consistent item for minimizing the early laning phase. Dorians Shield is very important when you're playing any melee versus range matchup that are very harass oriented. So if you're playing something like Akali into Orianna, or you're playing Akali into Syndra, where they're just constantly harassing you with their range advantage, it's a very, very great item, very effective at minimizing and allowing you to sustain through that constant harass. And one of the things I love about this item the most is that because it's so strong in the early laning phase, because not many champions in the game that are harass oriented have enough mana to actually kill you or get you low enough to actually get you in kill threat range through this amount of regeneration and amount of HP, and their +6 per 5 as well. So that's why I love it on a champion like Rumble, whereas I can sit back, relax with Rumble, with my Scrap Shield, with my Dorians Shield. I can guarantee to get to my 1100 gold or 1175 for my Sorks plus a pink ward every single time, as long as I play around the strengths of this item. Very, very solid item. And then again, like I said here, especially effective with champions that do not have resource issues. So if you don't need the mana or the mana regeneration from something like a Dorian's Ring or like a Corrupting Pot or something like that, then again, I love this item. That's why it's so good in champions like a Kali, Kassadin, and Rumble, because obviously Kassadin gets mana from his W and that sort of thing. And the last note here, guys, is that it's very good into champions like Orianna, like I mentioned before, specifically Orianna, because it's just constant short trades with the Q. Same reason as Syndra, although Syndra has a little bit more burst, but any low cooldown, short trading champion is very effective against, because you're just getting so much access to that unique passive. Now for Dorian's Ring, guys. So Dorian's Ring is very effective on mages who have a large first base goal. So whether they want to stay in lane for 1300 gold for Lost Chapter, or maybe 1100 gold for something like a Catalyst, any long extended laning phase where they don't want to be going back for an early Dark Seal, they don't want to be going back for an early tier 1 boost, they don't want to be going back for an early Amplifying Tune, they want to stay in lane for a long extended period of time, even on champions like Victor. Now the main reason this is the case is because it has mana regen, flat mana regen to be more precise, and flat mana regen is very effective in the early game, which we'll get into in a second. But across a long extended laning phase, if say you're playing Orianna with D-Ring versus a Syndra with Corrupting Pot, if the Syndra doesn't utilize the early effectiveness of Corrupting Pot, doesn't trade very aggressively, then you'll find as you both near 1000 gold, 1100 gold, 1200 gold, Orianna's mana pool will be fine. Whereas the Syndra is going to be really, really struggling, especially if she just runs in the early portion of the lane. Another big benefit of Dorian's Ring, guys, is that it's actually able to be stacked, right? And if you actually look at the stats, there's no unique passive, and it's actually flat mana regen, right? Now, flat mana regen is severely underrated. It's not percent mana, it's actually flat mana. So if you go back, say you're playing Ahri, and you go back for a second Dorian's Ring, you're very rarely going to have mana problems. Now, as an example to kind of exemplify this, let's take a look at the stats here. Now, 1 mana, we're basically getting 1 mana per second, which means 60 mana per minute. So you're basically getting a whole entire spell cast per minute. Now, if we look at the actual value of that, 3 Fairy Charms equals to 1 D-Ring for mana regen at level 1, because Fairy Charms are percent mana regen, and because our in the early game, mana regen is so low, I believe it's actually low throughout the entirety, most of the game anyway. So if you're buying an early Fairy Charm for mana regen, you get barely any value comparatively to Dorian's Ring. So if you really want access to mana in the early game, you get a lot of value from D-Ring. Plus, you get HP, and that stacks as well, which total would give you 120 if you had to, which is very, very nice. So overall, and 15 AP. So Dorian's Ring is a very solid item, and it's actually an item that I have started building a lot more. And the only situations where I'll go Corrupting Pot over D-Ring is if I know I'm going to be going back for an early Dark Seal, playing the lane very, very fast. Which, you know, for a lot of people, especially in lower elo, just isn't the case. Another thing, Dorian's Ring also synergizes well with Fleet because it's, you know, has AP, and there's AP scaling on Fleet as well. And just a quick note here, Akali can also take Dorian's Ring if the matchup is advantageous and she doesn't really need the durability from Dorian's Shield, because AP is quite solid on Akali, plus you get the durability from Dorian's Ring anyway. Even though you don't get value from the mana, but that's sometimes Akali just wants access to that extra AP if you want to play more aggressively in the early game. Now for Longsword, guys. So Longsword is good for champions that want to be rushing either Serrated Dirt, Tmat, or Gunblade. That's also why you generally see it as a first item on Katarina as well. So Longsword especially is very effective with high bonus AD ratio assassins, specifically Talon, right? So with Talon, with 1 Longsword, at level 2, you get a total of 52 more damage with your WQ passive combo, which is a ridiculous amount of damage, especially in the early laning phase. Generally taken in lanes that are played faster because it offers no durability and resources across a longer lane. So let's just say you're not taking aggressive heavy trades or playing the lane really fast in the early game. You get a lot more value from Dorian's Shield because Dorian's Shield, you're getting regeneration constantly over a long period of time. But if you want access to resources in a short period of time, if you're going Longsword 3 pots, then that can really benefit you because then you can use them whenever you want. You can use them very suddenly. So it's very good for, I guess, a lot of sustain in a short period of time. So everything about this starting item purchase means it basically says to me you're going to be playing the lane relatively fast. Now for Darksteel and Refillable. Now, I hate this starting item choice. I think it's incredibly weak, it's misunderstood, and if people really understood how weak it was, I don't think they would take it. So let's actually break it down. It's actually one of the lowest efficiency item starts comparatively to any other option. It doesn't offer any durability, less AP than D-Ring, and starting Refillable doesn't even give you more healing, even with the increased healing for pots. You still get less total healing than you would have otherwise with 2 HP pots. So in a faster lane it doesn't help, and even in a slower lane it doesn't really help. It doesn't really have a clear identity. It doesn't help with long extended laning phases. It doesn't help with early trading. It has low mana, low AP, and no HP. So it just feels to me it doesn't have an identity. Do you want to play slow and minimize and have a large first item base? Do you want to play fast and aggressive and heavy trade? What do you want? If you wanted to minimize or maybe play faster, it's way better to go Corrupting Pot than buy Darksteel after. Right? Because most likely, if you're going Darksteel, you probably want access to Corrupting Pot. Although, yes, Darksteel does, it's decent with Darksteel. The only redeeming factor of this item start is that, yes, you save gold. You don't have to buy any pots, and you don't have to buy Darksteel later on. But it feels like the early lane is so incredibly important, you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. So I try to avoid this starting item choice at all costs. Now for boots and 4 pots, only taken in very skill shot oriented matchups that are very poke oriented. So if you're playing something like Twisted Fate versus Xerath, where you're getting value from both the movement speed to dodge skill shots to minimize the amount of threat that Xerath has onto you, plus the sustain, then this purchase can be quite effective. You don't really see it too much anymore because Dorians Shield kind of gives you plenty of sustain. Or if you're under a lot of early pressure, you go Corrupting Pot and just early base for an early Darksteel. But it can be very effective against these very poke skill shot oriented matchups, commonly seen with a tier 2 boot rush strategy. So if you're playing versus something like a Syndra or a Xerath or a Vel'Koz or an Ahri, and you're looking to rush an early Mercs, then this start can actually be viable as well. So if you're playing TF into Xerath and I'm doing this starting item, then I will probably rush Mercurial Treads. And the last point here, because you get 4 pods, you actually get a lot of help sustaining through the lane, and especially in those lanes where you get heavily outranged in, and especially when you have a very farm-oriented jungler that is not going to help you get a tempo reset, they're not going to exert any early pressure. Now for Corrupting Pot, guys. So, Corrupting Pot, very important you understand this item. For champions that want to trade fast in lane, this really helps them extend their mana pool when heavy trading. So it's very much suited for early aggression. In lanes that are played slower, D-Ring is much better because of the inbuilt mana regeneration. The great thing about Corrupting Pot is that actually allows for tempo-based advantages, so you're going to be able to trade aggressively early, replenish those resources while trading, right? While trading, you're going to get those resources because you can just have it ticking in the background, which can allow you to bully the opponent off a specific wave, get pressure, get priority in those levels 3, 4 sort of thing, tempo-based, come back with a Darksteel, and then it starts getting really valuable. And I actually believe with Darksteel Corrupting Pot, I believe you actually get 470 total HP worth of healing, which is insane. And the last point here is that Corrupting Pot synergizes very well with Time Warp Tonic, both in terms of pace and practicality. Because if you think about Corrupting Pot at an identity level, it's for, early aggression, heavy trading, tempo basing. Now, the great thing with Time Warp Tonic is that, yes, it suits it perfectly because you want to be pushing the pace of the game. You get access to those resources quicker, which gives you more of a resource advantage over your opponent, which will potentially give you priority on that specific wave, which allows for more tempo resets, more pressure, more access to those early skirmishes, that sort of thing. Now for first bases, guys. So first recalls can completely dictate the way a game gets played out. It can literally be the difference between you winning or losing a laning phase. Now, there's a few quick theory points we need to cover before we get into the specifics. And the first one is components versus completed item. Now, let's just say, theoretically, you went back to base and you got double longsword instead of Tmat because you couldn't afford a Tmat. Whether you took bad trades in the early game, you didn't ration out your mana, you didn't manage the wave properly, and you had to go back and you couldn't finish your Tmat. Yes, there is only 5 base AD difference between these two purchases, but you completely miss out on the unique passive and the unique active. And as a result, guys, you're going to have to base again very soon, leading to a whole host of problems. And this is something that I see all too often. They think, oh no, it's fine, I'll just go back for another base. But if you think about it, let's just say you come back with double longsword and then the enemy went a second Dorians Blade or something much more aggressive than you. You're never going to find an opportunity, or how are you going to find an opportunity to get another recall without severely either getting behind in minions or giving the enemy an insane amount of roam potential, impacting the map a lot more than you, and causing a whole host of problems for everyone else on the map. So it's very important you understand the difference and the trade-off of double long, like, or whether it's this example, double longsword versus Tmat. It can be as different as different ones like double Tomb versus a finished lost chapter. There's a whole host of different examples, but just components versus completed items. And this is something that we're going to talk about a lot throughout this video. The second one is refillable and pinks. Now, the cost of not buying refillable, I spoke about this a lot in my videos, can be absolutely devastating. And similar to the reasons above, you go back to lane after your first recall, you don't have any pots. Now, if you're versing someone with, say, double pots or refillable and you have nothing, they can just put 2 and 2 together, go, oh, wait, this guy doesn't have any pots? If I just heavy trade with him once or short trade with him a few times, he's going to have to go back to base. I'm going to get massive tempo over this guy. I can deny him CS, I can freeze, I can go to skirmishes, and he can't do anything. So it's a really, really important thing that you guys do is make sure you're always buying a refillable and having pinks. And pinks, you know, they are important, especially in the higher elos. Lower elos, probably not so much, but still it's the premise. The difference between having a pink and not having a pink can have game-changing effects. So whether your jungler can get caught in the river because there's no vision there, it's going to be harder for your jungler to set up ganks, both for both defensive and offensive purposes. And guys, a quick, easy way to do this is just add on 75 gold onto your specific item purchase that you're looking to get. So maybe you want to go back for 1300 gold. Make it 1375, or even 225 for a refillable and a pink. Even better if possible. And the third one is minigames, guys. So minigames would have to be, for me, one of the most important concepts in League of Legends ever. Now, I did talk about minigames a lot in my previous videos, and it's something I'm going to try and bring back a lot more. Basically, what a minigame is, guys, it's a set amount of gold you're aiming to go into the lane to reach. So for Echo, that's the one I used to use it in the past. For my Echo guide, it was I want to stay in lane for 750 gold for my Dark Seal and my Dorians Ring. And if you come into a lane with a specific gold amount that you're aiming for, then that's going to dictate the quality of your trades, how fast you're going to trade, how much you need to ration out your resources, how you need to manipulate the wave, that sort of thing. Now, if you don't come into the lane with a specific mini game or a specific item amount or gold amount in your mind, then how are you going to know what sort of trades to take, what game pace you're looking for, what fights you shouldn't go for, where you should manage the wave, all of these things, how are you going to know? Now, this is what is going to largely bring consistency into your gameplay, but also more importantly, again, allow you to have such obvious power spikes and really minimize those power troughs. Because the difference between, say, 2 Amp Tombs and a Sapphire Crystal versus a Lost Chapter is night and day. It's so incredibly different. And it's the same for so many different items, guys. So, one quick note, guys, it's very important that minigames differ from matchup to matchup. It's not just, you know, Echo versus every single matchup do this. Yes, Echo is a bit of a weird example, more Orianna. So Orianna, in some matchups, I want to be aiming for 1300 gold for Lost Chapter, or in other matchups, I'm just aiming for 350 or even 425 for, say, a Dark Seal and a Pink, because I want to heavy trade early with my Time War Corrupting Pot, go back for a Dark Seal. Conversely, I'm starting Dorians Ring, aiming for a much higher, much larger item purchase for a long extended laning phase. Now, before we go any deeper into this video, guys, before I talk about which item to buy specifically, when you should go Oblivion Orb, when you should go lethality or double lethality, if you don't understand how both flat penetration works, percent penetration, how resistances work, then you're most likely just going to go back to blindly following guides, blindly following builds, without really understanding how to optimize threat onto a specific target. Now, that's what I really want to get across in this video. Now, the first thing we're going to cover is flat penetration. So for AP users, it's actually Magic Pen or flat magic penetration, and it's only built in 2 items. It's only through 2 items in the entire game: Oblivion Orb and Sork Tread. So it's a very hard to build stat, and you can also get it through Sudden Impact as well. And for AD users, it's actually called Lethality, and that's through all these items here. Now, Flat Penetration is very effective versus champions with low base resistances, like Cassiopeia and Cassidon, and especially if you're able to purchase Flat Penetration before they build Armor or MR. So this is the main reason why if you're playing Cassio into something like a Zed, and the Zed comes back with an early Serrated Dirt, and you don't build any armor, whether you come back with a tier or something like that, you are just going to get one shot. Like, you are so screwed. You have to, even if you play it flawlessly, you're still going to die 100-0 through barrier. So this is why it's so important to understand Flat Penetration. Now, let's just say the enemy AD carry is getting ahead in the early game. Maybe you're versing an enemy Draven, and you're playing Fizz, or you're playing Zoe, you're playing Syndra, any of these champions, and the enemy AD carry is getting ahead. They got 2 kills. And let's just say they actually build, let's say they build Berserkers, attack speed brutes, or even they build Tarbis for their counterpart, right? Because Draven's going to be versing an Ashe or something, they're going to build Tarbis, or they're even going to take an armor shard in their runes. Now, if you're playing a mid lane mage that can actually have access to Oblivion Orb or Sork Treads, you're going to be basically nearly doing with these 2 items, you're going to be doing true damage to this person, and it's a really great way to generate threat on a specific target when you know they don't have any of that resist. So Flat Pen is very good at mitigating or generating massive amount of threat on one target. So it's very important to understand and look at which form of resistances they're actually buying. And conversely, if you're a lethality builder and there's a lot of AP on your team, everyone's building MR, it's a very great way to get or have a lot of threat onto a specific target. So this is why I actually love going Oblivion Orb and this combo of Oblivion Orb into Sorks when I'm the only AP and when I want to shut down a specific squishy member who aren't able to build that certain type of resist. And note, guys, the power of lethality is based off of level, okay? So when you buy a lethality item, you don't get all the lethality up front. You get a portion of the lethality, and then you actually get drips of it every single time you level up. And this is actually why lethality users snowball so heavy with a level lead. So if you're playing something like Zed and then you get ahead, you get maybe 1 or 2 levels ahead of everyone in the game, you do so much damage because you actually get more access to more lethality. So that's something to think about as well. And whereas on the other hand, Magic Pen is just flat all the time. You get full access to that Magic Penetration as soon as you buy it. And Flat Penetration is less effective as the game goes on because base stat champions, the base stats champions acquire through levels. So this is actually why you don't want to be building Oblivion Orb later in the game, because everyone's base resistances go up through levels. And even lethality, you don't want to be buying it later in the game because even their base armor or base MR without getting any resistance items is still going to massively mitigate the amount of damage you're going to be able to do with these items. So that's why you only want to be getting lethality generally in the early portion of the game. So now for percent penetration. So percent penetration is important when facing high total resistances, right? Because if you're versing someone with a lot of resistances, you're shaving off a percentage of a large number, which means you get a lot of value. Now, to be specific, if they have 80 magic resist or more, or 100 armor or more, then you should definitely be getting a percent penetration item. But below this number, then you'd actually get more damage from raw AD or raw AP. So it's very important to understand that this is the breakpoint. This is the magic number that you really need to understand. Now, another thing you need to understand is that by default, guys, ranged and melee champions have different base and scaling resistance values. So this is actually why ranged champions are significantly squishier, and why ranged champions are a lot more susceptible to things like flat penetration, whereas melee champions are a lot less susceptible to flat penetration. So if we look at 95% of ranged champions in the entire game, they range from MR goes from 30 to 38, whereas for melees it goes from 32 to 53. Now, if you just do some basic addition here, a melee champion with Mercury Treads will actually get them to 78 MR. Just Mercury Treads will get them to 78 MR, which is only 2 less than the breakpoint in which you should be already getting percent penetration. Which just shows you why it's so important not to forego Void Star when versing tankier melee champions, especially when they build Mercury Treads, okay? Very important to understand. And that's also why ranged champions, like I said before, are very susceptible to flat penetration because they just have such low base resistances and low scaling on their resistances. Now, the reason I didn't talk about armor is because armor is actually very varies from champion to champion, whereas MR's very clean. MR's basically the same for 95% of champions, but armor can actually change very drastically from champion to champion, in which you need to really look at the stats in a matchup or really get an understanding of how their base armor or scaling armor actually goes. Now, the last point here, very important to understand also, is that if you build Sorc Shoes and Oblivion Orb, you're getting 33 Magic Pen, right? Now, if we actually look over here to the ranged champions, if you build these two items, right, you're basically already nearly doing true damage to a ranged champion with magic damage, which is ridiculous. So if the enemy AD carry or the enemy mid lane mage doesn't build any MR, and you have Sorc Shoes and Oblivion Orb, or the earlier the better, the earlier access to these the better, you can literally do true damage to these people. They're so incredibly squishy. And on top of that, if you actually take sudden impact, you get another +6 there, which already gets you, to 39. So you're always basically doing true damage, no matter what level, to anyone that doesn't build any MR. And note, guys, 38 right here is level 18. So majority of the time, like what's that? Halfway through here, level 9, they're only going to have, 34. Right, so at these two items, which you could potentially get by, I would say level 9, something like that. You're literally going to be doing true damage if they don't build any MR. Sorry, so it's very important to understand. And the other note I actually have on the left hand side here is that the way to think about penetration, guys, is that penetration is needed when you are unable to fulfill your role within a given game. It all ties back to your role. Like, what are you trying to achieve? If your role isn't to shred the front line, then maybe percent penetration isn't something that's relatively important to you. Like, if you're playing Zed, your role most games isn't going to be to kill the front line. It's just to have threat on the enemy AD carry or the enemy control mage or just enemy squishies, in which, it's probably better to either have raw AD because they're not going to have these amount of values anyway, or even just flat pen. So it is something to think about. You always got to think about your role. And a lot of the time, guys, just because they have this number, you don't want to be instantly panicking. Oh, I was like, I need to go Black Cleaver now. I need to go Void Staff, or I need to go Lord Dominic's, or whatever. You don't want to forego your core items still. Like, yes, you should be looking to build one of these items, but shouldn't be foregoing your core, 2 or 3 items just for the sake of percent penetration. It's just something to think about as well. Now for early resistances, guys. So early resistances are extremely valuable versus champions that revolve around 100 0 threat and all-ins, right? So when you're versing a champion like Fizz, like versus Zed or versus Kiana, early resistances, whether it's a cloth armor or a null magic mantle, can literally be the difference between you surviving a 100 0 like all-in combo or not. And if you survive it and they waste their ultimate, they waste their ignite, and you don't die, then they're useless because, again, they don't have an identity. Their identity revolves around that, and they need to snowball. But it is matchup dependent, guys. If you don't need the early resistances, then I wouldn't recommend it because it will delay your key item spike. So you only need it if you really are under that 100 0 threat. When you're trying to minimize heavy poke matchups with sustain, early resistances can actually help you utilize the healing over time, because as we know how lifesteal works, right? Let's just say you're versing, maybe you have a Vamp Scepter or something like that. If you're versing a lot of poke damage and you're getting really low and you can't stay in the lane for an extended period of time, you're not going to get any value from the healing, right? Because healing or, lifesteal is only valuable if you're able to constantly attack things and slowly heal over time. But if you're getting so low that you're not going to get into position to hit the minions to stay in the lane for a long time, then you need a base, right? So you're just not going to get any value. You might as well just have threat rather than lifesteal. So lifesteal in combination with, or healing in combination with early resistances can give you the durability to make sure you're not taking too much damage to make use of that healing over time. Or whether it's not even just lifesteal, even just pots. Pots, the same concept. You don't even need to tunnel in on the lifesteal. Early resistances, for obvious reasons, count as flat penetration. So any lethality user or early person who's building a Sorcs or an Oblivion Orb, a null magic mantle can literally be the difference between taking true damage and minimizing their burst significantly. This is also why if you build an early Tarbies or even just sitting on an early Seekers versus any of these champions, you're going to massively reduce their threat onto you. And if you plan to build HP, whether it's through Roa or whether it's through Doran's Rings, then you do get a lot of value from resistances, because, again, if you have all resistances with no HP, then there's really not much point. So if I am starting Doran's Rings, I feel I only buy Seekers early if I'm starting Doran's Rings. if I am starting a corrupting pot, I won't go early resistances because I just don't have enough HP to make it worth it. Like, the resistances won't give me enough durability. So it's very important to think, and that's also why, guys, if you're playing Kassadin and you sit on an early Catalyst and you build a Seekers, these two together make you incredibly tanky. So HP as a just as a concept, HP is very, very effective with resistances. Another note here, it can delay item spikes, guys, so you've got to be very careful. Avoid if possible. You must be buying, and a great way to think about it is that you must be buying resistances with a proactive mindset, okay? So if you're building resistances just to survive, like all the time, like what are you surviving for? Like if you're just surviving and never going to get pressure and you're never going to get pressure on this guy ever, then there's no point. Like I would rather just build damage and have threat on him, or at least create some form of counterplay. Like that's why a lot of the time I actually just build like Lost Chapter on Orianna first, rather than going Seekers. Because if I go Seekers, I'm never going to be able to kill that guy, or I'm going to spike so late that he's going to get so much pressure and win the game anyway. But if I actually rush Lost Chapter and maybe just sit on one cloth armor, then you know, I've got a proactive mindset. I'm trying to create opportunity for myself. I'm not just trying to survive for no reason, right? And if you're surviving but do no damage, then what's the point? Same concept, guys. Now for the first base items, guys, we're going to start with the AP users. So now that we have a bit of an understanding with resistances, with magic penetration, flat pen or lethality, and percent pen, now we can get a little bit more detailed in terms of the items. So the first one here is Catalyst of Aeons. So Catalyst, I like to build Catalyst over Blasting Wand when building Roa, if I know I don't really have kill threat anyway, and I really want to continue to minimize and walk the tightrope. Catalyst is one of the best minimizing items in the entire game because of this unique passive here, where you restore mana equal to 15% of damage taken from champions, and you restore health equal to 20% of mana spent, up to 15 health per cast. So it's a very effective ability both for HP and mana in the early portion of the game, and it's a great way to be able to get to that Roa effectively without dying. Like I said here, amazing item for minimizing the early portion of the game. Note, 1 HP per 5 mana spent and 1 mana per 6 damage from champions. And guys, we've got to remember this, and this is very important. 75 mana cost is a required mana value for maximum heal value. So this is why Catalyst is actually so effective on Twisted Fate, right? Because Twisted Fate's W actually cost 100 mana. So you're not only getting like the full value from the passive here because it's above 75 mana, but then you also get the mana on top of that as well with your blue card. So you're basically never going to run out of mana when you have Catalyst of Aeons as well. This is also why TF is really not that blue buff reliant. So it's very important that your champion actually has high costs if you're going to get a lot of value from this. This is why Kassadin gets a lot of value, TF gets a lot of value, and Nivea gets a lot of value. All these champions get a lot of value with Catalyst because they have such high mana costs. That's what I said here, guys. TFQ as well is 100 mana max rank, and Kassadin R is 80 mana as well. Something to think about. Now for Lost Chapter. Now, Lost Chapter is probably, I would say, one of the strongest items in the entire game. I love this item. The unique passive is the reason this item is so incredibly strong and synergizes with CDR. So if we look at this here, grants an additional 10% cooldown reduction, and this unique here is my favorite, my little baby here. Upon leveling, restore 20% of your max mana over 3 seconds. This is actually why so many people as well don't even like to upgrade Lost Chapter, because it's so good. You actually lose, when you upgrade to Ludens or GLP or whatever, you lose this passive here. And this is really, really strong in the early to mid game. A very, very strong unique passive. So no, not even a unit yet, it's unique passive, sorry. Bread and butter power spike item allows for my favorite concept as offense as my defense. Now, because this item gives so much utility through, it gives utility through CDR, you have base mana, you get this also unique passive here. You have so much mana that you can just freely use abilities. Now, beforehand, if you didn't have the mana, you would have to be very conservative with your abilities. Like you can't thin the wave too much with abilities, you can't take risky skill shots, any of these things. But with this, you have so much mana, you can just push the wave consistently or use your mana so incredibly aggressive, which allows you to have create defense through offense. You've probably heard that through my videos as well. Allows for versatility in your builds, because Lost Chapter, guys, builds into GLP, builds into Ludens, and it builds into Seraph. So a lot of the time, I will have a good idea about what I'm building. But if I'm able to get to Lost Chapter, I then can consider, okay, do I need? I can actually swap to GLP if need be. Or I can build a Ludens if I need be. Or I can get Serras. I can actually gauge the pace of the game or my role within the game and to decide what I ideally want to build that game. But it is important to note, guys, it's probably the most strict minigame for any mid lane mage because of how expensive it is and how weak the components are comparatively. So it builds out of 2 Amp Tombs and a Sapphire Crystal, right? So you're getting about the same amount of AP or similar. What, like, these give 15? I believe they give 15. Is it 15? Which gives you like 30. Don't quote me on that one though, but you get the mana, which is not too bad, but you don't get any of the cooldown reduction and you don't get any access to this unique passive. So you miss out on a ridiculous amount of value. And the difference in terms of like gold value between these 3 items, the components versus Lost Chapter, I don't know the math, but it's incredibly, very, very stark differences. So very important that you have the perfect amount of gold for this item and you're not just basing on like double amplifying tomb. Very, very strict minigame. Now we're going to go over tier here. I ideally aim for Lost Chapter or Pickaxe first as first components of either my Archangel or Manamune. I try to avoid building tier first if possible because it just gives me no offensive stats. Yes, it gives me a bit of mana. It gives me this unique passive which refunds 10 mana spent. Yes, and it allows me to stack up my my tier earlier. But in the early game, if I have no AP, I have no durability. It just feels very underwhelming, and I really try to avoid it at all costs. Like, if I have a choice, if I'm playing Orianna, and if I have a choice between 850 and just straight up get my tier, or I have the same amount of gold, I'll actually rather go like an Amplifying Tomb and like a Dark Seal or something. I would rather go even like a Doran's Ring and an Amplifying Tomb. I would just rather some form of early AP to get me through that early laning phase, because otherwise I'm just going to give way too much pressure. Buying this item first means you'll likely concede early pressure and lane shrink, just like I said before. Now, if Archangels or Manamune is purchased standalone, it would take around 6 to 10 minutes for full stacks. But if you were to build the tier earlier, it would probably reduce this around 3 to 4 minutes if you're very aggressively stacking this tier. Just something to note for you guys and just put it in context. Now, Ryze and Cassio are kind of the exception because they get a lot of value from tier. And it's quite important for them to stack it up, and they get a lot of mana from having access to resources, so it's a little bit different for them. And they're probably not going to get pressure regardless. So those are 2 champions that I probably would build tier early. And the last one here, on Kassadin, I build it after Roa for the same reasons. I want access to my Roa as fast as possible. This is not going to help me generate any early threat. If I'm playing Kassadin, I'm either going to go early Blasting Wand or Catalyst. I don't get enough durability or threat through tier. Now for Seekers, guys, primarily built into AD Assassins due to minimizing their burst threat, and only if it can really lead to priority though. Like, I don't want to be rushing Seekers if I'm still losing the lane, and it ties into that concept before, guys. So now that you understand how lethality works, like, if I can largely minimize their early kill threat just by sitting on a cloth armor anyway. The only reason I would fully upgrade to a Seekers is if either I have double Dorans and I actually get priority, because with double Dorans or if sometimes a single Dorans and Seekers, I then have at least mana, the mana regen as well, and a bit of HP to actually get value from the armor, which makes it I could actually get priority. But if I have a corrupting pot and I go straight into Seekers and I have no HP, and my mana regen is really poor, so I'm just going to be screwed. So I only try to buy it if I'm versing an assassin, and it will actually help me get pressure in the lane. If you don't get pressure or win trades, even with Seekers, then you just build AP instead of 1 cloth armor. Like I said before, this is why as Orianna versus Yasuo, I'll just rush Lost Chapter and sit on the 1 cloth armor. I typically rush if I start D-Ring, and it can be hard if you don't get blue buffs. Like, if you don't get blue buffs and you have Seekers, you're really, really screwed. Another one I tried to put on by itself, because it is a hybrid user one, is Hex Revolver. It is one of the cheapest early spikes of damage you can buy in the entire game as a mid laner, because it's so incredibly cheap. It's 1050, builds out a double amplifying tube, and because of this passive here, this unique passive, it gives you a really great form of early burst. But you got to be careful, guys, because it gives no resource, it gives no mana, it gives no mana regen, and it gives you no CDR, and it gives you no durability. It has no HP, no resistances. So you got to be very careful when building this item. I generally love buying this item on any champion I want to abuse my early strength with and capitalize on having access to my R. So if I'm playing like Echo, I'm playing Silas, Lissandra, Akali, where my level 6 is relatively strong, I have a relatively strong-ish level 6 in terms of just having threat on my opponent, I want to use my R aggressively and get pressure in the lane, then I'll probably will be going Hex Drinker Revolver. You need to be able to utilize the proc in your all-in as a power spike. If you're not able to utilize this this unique passive here, then there's literally no point in buying it. And, you know, it makes a lot of sense here. It's not good from behind or when getting shoved in because it's offering no durability, no utility. So it's going to be hard for you to minimize and because you just have none of that. And more importantly, it's going to be so hard for you to proc this passive when you're literally just sitting under tower CSing. So don't buy it if you're in a very unfavorable matchup. Now for a very niche one, but I did want to include it, is Blasting Wand. It is really only rushed for Rod of Ages buyers, but because we have a lot of, I guess, Kassadin players who watch my channel, we have a lot of TF players, it is important to understand it. I only rush this component, if I know I already have an early lead and I really kind of want to push that lead, or I'm in a very favorable matchup where my offense acts as my defense. So if I'm playing like TF versus Silas, I actually like going this item because it gives me a considerable amount of threat, especially when I'm going the Electrocute with Inspiration Secondary with Corrupting Pot, start playing the lane very fast and aggressive. It really complements my threat. So yeah, that's basically the only situation we'd be going it. And on Kassadin as well, if it allows you to win the lane early, sometimes you see it when Kassadin versus like a Fizz, because his early trading is just so much stronger than he would have otherwise had with Catalyst. But as a little caveat here, guys, if you can win trades with Catalyst anyway, it is always better because you get all the access to the unique passives, you get more resources, and more importantly, if you win trades with Catalyst, you're not only going to, you know, have that difference in resources, but your resources are going to go up faster because of your because of the passive of Catalyst as well. So it can create massive advantages. Commonly seen with TF in fast games, like for example versus Silas, or on Kassadin in fast games. Note, if you do not get pressure with this item, it can be quite underwhelming because then, again, it offers no durability, it offers no utility. So if you're just getting shoved in, you'd be way better off with either something like a Dark Seal with a Ruby Crystal, or even just straight up Catalyst. Much, much better. Now for first base items with AD users. Now, a common one is Tmat. Now, you typically rush this item if you either need wave clear, so you commonly see it on champions like Aurelia, Camille, and Kiana, or if it complements your champion's identity, like Talon or Nocturne, where they really want to minimize the early lane, one-shot the wave, either push and move, or push and get Raptors, that sort of thing. Note, you cannot freeze with this item, very important, and freezing is quite an important part of the early game, so you're basically throwing that out the window completely if you are buying Tmat. And that was one of the big reasons why I was a bit iffy on Aurelia buying this item, but the lack of wave clear with Aurelia really hurt in the mid lane, so that's why you generally see it on Aurelia a lot. And it really does enable that push and roam strategy, and it does enable you to navigate unfavorable matchups as well. That's why you see it on Nocturne so often, because you just go in with your Q, your passive, your Tmat, you one-shot the wave, you can back up, you can tempo reset, that sort of thing. Now for Serrated Dirt, guys, this is basically the go-to item you should aim for on any lethality-based assassin. It gives you an insanely nice spike in damage, like we mentioned before, talking about flat penetration, synergizes with any champion that wants to be pushing the pace of the game and generating kill threat at level 6, because early on, guys, people don't have very low base resistances, and you're going to be really significantly increasing your damage with flat penetration. And you'll see here, guys, look at this. Even though it says plus 10 lethality, you're only getting a portion of it based on level. That's how lethality works. This item gives no durability, so you can't really afford to play slow, guys. So if you're taking bad trades with this item, or you're getting pushed in with this item, it can be quite tricky unless it does generate kill threat, unless you're like in a calculated way getting shoved in. But if you're taking bad trades and you're low HP and you're not gonna be able to all in your opponent, it can be quite bad, because again, you got no HP, you get no resistances, you got no CDR, or for other champions that have mana, you get no resources, that sort of thing. Now for Vampire Acceptor, guys, it's a very solid first item for most AD or even hybrid mid laners due to its effectiveness comparatively to the other components of items like Bork, right? Because if you think Bork, you got Vampire Acceptor, or you have Recurve Bow, essentially. And Recurve Bow or attack speed in the early game, especially as a mid laner, doesn't really provide any any threat, or it doesn't really help you with the laning phase because either you're so squishy you can't be in the long extended trades anyway because your base damage is going to be so low, or there's no on-hit effects, so you don't get value from the attack speed itself. Attack speed is generally a scaling stat. It's not really an early game stat for mid laners anyway. It's only bought when rushing Bork or Gunblade, and you must be careful how you lane with this item, guys. In order to get value from it, you must focus on taking proper trade windows. So let's just say, hypothetically, you're playing, Aurelia mid, you get your Vampire Acceptor or whatever, or even like Lucian mid, you come back with Vampire Acceptor, and you take a really poor trade, and you get to like 20% HP. Now, if that happens, you're going to be quite scared to walk up because then you're in kill threat range, right? And then you can't auto-attack the wave enough. So then you don't get access to the lifesteal, which means the lane's going to get played too fast for you to get any usage out of the lifesteal. So you ideally with lifesteal in general, you want to be taking shorter, slower, extended trades, longer trades over an extended period of time to get more value out of the lifesteal. And then lastly here, allows you to not buy pots. So some people like buying Vampire Acceptor because you just don't have to buy pots anymore. Although, guys, it does have a lot of synergy with pots because if you have access to pots and you take a poor trade, it can get you to a point where you're not really in kill threat range and you can actually extend the laning phase and really utilize that lifesteal. And actually, sorry, the last one here was you need to be able to attack less effective into unavoidable burst. So what I mean by that is if you're not able to attack and you're under a lot of threat, whether they have a lot of threat range on you, whether you're versing a Syndra or another assassin or something like that, if you're not able to actively attack the wave, you're not going to get any value. So it's very, it's less effective into unavoidable burst pretty much, which is pretty self-explanatory. Now for Hex Drinker, this item is only worth rushing when it allows you to survive a certain amount of burst, typically accompanied with CC. Now, if you are just buying this item because they have magic damage and you're like, oh yeah, it will counter flat pen, that is not the way you should be viewing this item because, again, you can typically minimize early flat pen with just the null magic mantle. You don't need to go ahead and spend all your gold on a Hex Drinker. So your only situations where you want to be buying it is when you literally need it to survive 100 to 0 all-in threats. So something like an Annie or a Syndra where you can get 100 to 0. Okay, that's when the only situations you should be buying this item. And remember, guys, when you're buying this item, your threat goes considerably down because you're delaying any potential lethality purchases or Tiamat purchases. If you think about it, you're playing Zed and you buy an early Hex Drinker, then you have no lethality. So your window where everyone has low base resistances goes through the floor, right? You want to be getting lethality as early as possible in the game while everyone has no resistance items or they have very low base resistances. Very important. So I try not to build this item. I try to avoid this item at all costs. And it's actually got very low damage for the item cost as well. And like I said before, one null magic mantle was just fine. Now for tier 2 boot strengths, guys. We're going to start with Sork Treads. Now, I did mention this before, but there's literally only 3 sources of flat magic penetration in the entire game. You got Oblivion Orb, you got Sork Treads, and you have Sudden Impact. Okay, and not only does it give you access to flat magic penetration, it literally gives you the highest amount of flat magic penetration out of all the sources. I believe it gives you like 18 flat magic penetration. It's actually a very gold efficient item. For 800 gold, right, ignoring the 300 you get from the tier 1 boots, the 800 gold, what you actually get is, in terms of effective stats, you get 18 flat magic penetration and you get 20 movement speed. So it's a very, very efficient item and is very great at generating threat onto targets that aren't getting any early magic resist. So it's a very great item, very underutilized item in my opinion. Way too many people either buy Mercs or Tarbis when they don't necessarily need it and they don't understand how much threat they would have had otherwise with these boots. Next one here is Berserker Greaves. Not a really commonly valued stat within the mid lane. Yasuo is the only exception, mainly because attack speed doesn't really have an identity in the mid lane. Because again, without a lot of raw stats, attack speed doesn't really do much, or until you kind of have full items that have on-hit effects, which just isn't really common in the mid lane. Next is Ninja Tarbis, for obvious reasons, very effective against lethality builders, and because of the passive on it against a lot of auto attack based champions. It can be an alternative to Seekers if you do need a bit of armor within your build, but again, you are going to have reduced threat versus ranged champions because if you do build it, because you're missing out on that flat magic penetration. And one thing about flat magic pen, guys, if I have a very heavy magic damage team, like I'm on a team with multiple AP sources of damage, then I basically always go this, because if I don't build this, people get one null magic mantle and I don't have this, I just do very little amounts of damage. So I always try to get it if I have a lot of magic damage on my team. Next is Mercs, effective against kits that rely on CC for damage. And what I mean by that is any champion that their kit revolves, when they hit the CC, that allows them to get more follow-up damage. So specifically Zoe, right? So say Zoe lands a bubble. Now, if you have Merc Treads, it literally changes the way Zoe has to use Q. Like, she can't just do a full wind-up Q on you and get max damage if you build Mercs. It can literally change the entire trading pattern. So any champion that it forces them to change their trading pattern, this is very, very effective. And for obvious reasons, it's also good against very level 6 oriented burst champions like Fizz or Diana, so you don't just get one shot. Brutes of Swiftness. Now, Brutes of Swiftness are kind of meta at the moment, and they're very, very strong. They actually have 15 more movement speed than any other tier 2 brute in the game, plus they're very cheap, 900 gold, plus you get slow resist, which is a very underappreciated stat. And slow resist as an actual stat is incredibly rare. And just as a quick comparison, guys, if you have a fully stacked Relentless Hunter and you have Swifties, you actually get Moby speed equivalent. That's how great these boots are. So this is one of the main reasons as well why I think Moby has actually just died, because people realize how great this is for a cheap cost, how much more consistent it is, because you just have flat more 15 than anyone else in the game. Now for Mobies, they're basically the roaming / tempo reset boots, lower base movement speed, which people as well, some people don't even realize they actually have 25 compared to 45, and they're really hard to justify now ever since the nerfs to the cost. So I pretty much never take this on mid laners anymore. If you want that extra roaming potential, I personally would just go Swifties. And lastly, the Ionian boots, you get 10% CDR, summoners and abilities. It's very cheap, very cost-effective item, very, very solid, pretty self-explanatory to be honest. It is quite good when you're playing champions that don't build CDR in their first few items. So if you're playing a champion like, you know, Vlad or like even like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but champions that don't really build a Lost Chapter item or a Ludens or a GLP, any of these, Annie's a perfect example. These can actually be quite effective. Again, I try to stay away from them because I like the flat magic men for me personally, but it is something to think about. Now, my last quick note here, guys. I didn't really mention when to rush them because I think it's quite self-explanatory, but I very, very rarely rush these boots before I have my core item, whether it's a Lost Chapter, whether it's a, you know, my Catalyst or whatever. And the main reason being, guys, is because without, yes, you might have great magic pen, but if you don't have AP, it just doesn't feel, it feels very underwhelming. The main situation that I do go for a tier 2 boot rush is when I'm going for Mercs. I'll go for an early Merc. So if I am in a very hard matchup that I get a lot of value from both the early MR, the extra movement speed, and the CC reduction, then the tenacity, then I'll go Mercs. That's why it's so good into champions like Ahri, Lux, Syndra, and Zoe. That's why as well Dopa, a lot of the time, when he's versing champions like Zoe, will rush Mercs, or when he's versing some of these champions, he'll actually rush Mercs. Very, very useful. And in terms of Sorks, I will go it if I do get value from the extra movement speed after Lost Chapter. But if I don't get value from the extra movement speed, I'll actually finish my Ludens first, then I'll go into the early tier 2 boots. Now for first core items, guys. So first core item purchases are so crucial because they set the tone for the entirety of the game. And this is what we need to address. We need to address how core item purchases are influenced by the components that they are built out of, not just the final completed item itself. So if you think of Ludens, for example, yes, Ludens is a great item. It gives you 20% CDR with a really nice unique passive. But one of the biggest reasons Ludens, or all those items, Ludens, GLP, Seraphs, are such a crucial item or a core mage item is because it's built out of Lost Chapter. And Lost Chapter is such an amazing early game core item spike, and it's amazing to sit on, whereas some other items like Blasting Wand, Amplifying Tombs, Ruby Crystals are not so great to sit on. So that's a massive, I guess, contributor to what makes certain items great. The next one, we need to talk about sequencing plans when buying items. So for example, if you don't understand what items are built out of or how much gold is required, then you're not really going to know what minigame you need to set for yourself when heading into a specific matchup. The third one, how core items must be directly tied to the game pace you are after. if you're playing a very fast-paced game, then maybe you should consider buying something that's a little bit cheaper, like a Proto Belt or a GLP. Maybe you want to take the game a little bit slower. You can afford to go a Seraphs, that sort of thing. And 4, how core item choices are tied to the champ's trading patterns and identity. We'll get into that as well. And 5, why we don't build defensive items first. Now, for first core items for AP users, we have Lumens Echo, very bread and butter item. It's very effective in 2v2 burst-oriented fights and 1v1 short trades. And the reason being, guys, is because you need to have 100 stacks to utilize it. So in a long extended fight, or, you know, any fight that's not just burst-oriented, you're not really going to get too much value because you're only getting one of these off. And if this isn't meaningfully changing that fight, or it's not burst oriented, then you're really not going to get max value from this item. And that is also why it's great for 1v1 very short oriented trades. The great thing about Lumens Echo is that it's actually very reliable damage comparatively to something like GLP, right? Because GLP, they can hide behind minions, that sort of thing. And then more importantly, Lumens Echo, if people didn't know, it actually prioritizes enemies' champions. So if you hit it and proc it on the minions, it will actually bounce onto champions. It will prioritize champions, not other minions. So it's a very reliable form of damage. And it is an earlier spike than Archangels, whereas Archangels, we'll get into in a second, is a very ramping, scaling item. And it's not effective for extended skirmishes, like I said before. And you lose the other part of haste passive once upgraded. And I spoke about this before in the Lost Chapter section. But the other element of the haste passive when we had the Lost Chapter was that you had access to, I believe it was 20% mana, max mana restoration on level up or something like that. You just don't get that anymore. So that is also a bit, yes, you get a lot more max mana here, but you do lose that extra bit of the passive on the Lost Chapter. So it is something to think about when you upgrade it. Note, guys, it is more expensive than GLP. It's 1050 compared to 450 gold to finish. So once you have these two items, Lost Chapter, Blasting Wand, you need 1050 on top of that to finish Ludens, which is a lot of gold. Comparatively to GLP, once you have the two components of GLP, you only need 450 gold to upgrade it. So, something to think about there is that it can be a little bit awkward with base timings. You have to stay in lane for a decent amount of time to actually get the gold and not buy anything else to actually finish the Lumens Echo, which is one of the biggest strengths of why GLP is such, I guess, an earlier spiking item and a very effective item. Now for Archangels / Seraphs, guys, this is the heaviest scaling option. You start off at around 60 all the way, scaling all the way up to 120. The reason it's 60 is because you get base 50 here, plus you get AP equivalent to 1% of max mana. And by the time you get this item, mages are sitting around 1k mana, so you get around 10 from that as well. So that's 60. And compare that to what you would get with Ludens, you get 90. So there's about 30 difference there. But once it's upgraded, you get 30 more than Ludens. So it's considerably more AP once it's actually evolved. Now, you generally see this purchase on champions with low cooldowns. Now, it's great with champions with low cooldowns for two reasons. It allows them to freely use that ability very aggressively, very greedily, rather than just having to be frugal with their mana. But more importantly, it actually allows them to stack this up very fast. That's why you see it on Ori, spamming Qs. That's why you see it on Ziggs. That's why you see it on Cassiopeia, spamming Es, that sort of thing. But it is also good on champions with high mana cost because you actually get 25% of mana refunded off abilities. So if your ability costs 100 mana, you get 25 back, which is very effective for very high mana cost champions. And it's generally taken when you want to play long extended fights because you get access to that mana, so you can actually spam abilities. If you want more burst and you get more probably get more value from something like a Ludens or a GLP. Now, this item is generally bought as a 2-item spike. Like, when you pick this item, you shouldn't be thinking, oh, I've got Archangels, now I've spiked. No, yes, it is a spike, but by the time you reach your second item spike, then your Seraphs is going to be largely upgraded. Then it all kind of comes together, largely either Seraphs, Rabadons, or Seraphs, Liandry's. Very good combo for a very solid mid-game item spike, mid to late game item spike. And once evolved to Seraphs, it can facilitate greedier itemization due to not relying on HP for durability. This is why I love this specific item on Orianna, because with the once it's upgraded to Seraphs and I get access to that big shield in combination with the raw AP I get from Seraphs and Rabadons, my E shield is going to be massive, and then I don't really have to buy Morellos or Liandry's at that point, so then I can just get all my durability through AP, which is awesome. If I can get away with that, it's really good. And then the last point here, which is synergizes very well with Presence of Mind, because it's going to be increasing your max mana, which then gives you more AP. Just another little niche interaction there. Now for Hex Trick GLP, earlier spiking damage and easier to build, like I said before, 450 comparatively to 1050 of Ludens. Much better for a faster game pace. Great against low mobility linear champions because it allows you to set up your abilities to hit them. So if you're playing something like Syndra into Orianna, it's actually really good. Or even Zoe. That's why we see it so much on Zoe at high elos, because you play Zoe into Orianna. Zoe just walks up, sprays you down with the GLP, you can't move, you can't dodge the E, or you either have to flash it, and if you get hit by the E, you take a really bad trade. So it's very good against low mobility champions that can't really dodge skill shots effectively. And it's only taken when your team has multiple carry threats. So if I'm playing, say Ari, for example. Ari can take this setup with Glacial, right? I don't want to be taking this specific approach if I'm the sole damage dealer, because my damage is way less than what it would be with, or not way less, but it's less than what it would be with Ludens. So I want to maximize my damage if I'm the sole carry threat. But if I'm on a team with multiple damage threats, I don't necessarily need that extra damage. We have a lot of people on the team that can actually utilize this extra utility. That's the way I like to view this item. And it is a very low value item if you aren't using the active off cooldown, because if you think about it, you're sacrificing Luden's Echo passive, the actual Echo unique passive, which would be, quite reliable. Every single time it's stacking up, it's proccing onto enemy champions. And if you're not using this off cooldown, off 40-second cooldown, then you're missing out on a lot of damage over time. It's just something to think about. And it does obviously synergize very well with Glacial. Now for Hextech Protobelt, probably one of my favorite items in the entire game. It's great for increasing threat range for champions that revolve around closing the gap. This is why you see it largely on champions like Echo. You see it on champions like Diana, because again, they largely revolve around that Echo E to get onto the target, that Diana QE combo. And if you can use Protobelt to close that extra gap to get in the range to hit your Q on Diana, to get in range to use your E, then it massively increases your threat range. And the other great thing as well, it can be great for breaking spell shields, which is one of the main reasons I loved it on Annie, because I felt like when I played Annie, everyone just built Banshees. So if I could break that, get my stun off, which would increase my total damage I would deal on that target. Very, very effective for that as well. One thing I love about this item, guys, is that it has very flexible components. If I am doing well in the early game and I want to complement my level 6 spike, then I can go Revolver. If I need a little bit more durability, I can actually sit on the Amp Tomb and then sit on the Ruby Crystal, have a bit more durability. Or I can go straight into Kindle Gem and just play defensive until I finish my Protobelt. I love that it has one defensive element and one, I guess, aggressive offensive element. I really like that within this item. Now, one thing you need to be aware of is that it can be very problematic for you if you have a high mana cost champion. This is where I've been getting a little bit into a hole with Lissandra. Now, I love this item on Lissandra because it makes sense for the threat range, it makes sense for breaking spell shields, it has flexible components, it complements my level 6 spike with Revolver, that sort of thing, but I do have high mana cost. Now, you can nullify this a little bit with Presence of Mind, but if you're not getting early kills or early assists, you're really going to struggle and you really miss out on getting access to something like you would a Lost Chapter, which gives you a lot of mana. As we said before, we're seeing that not only the base mana, not only the CDR, but the unique passive on Haste, which gives you the mana restoration as well. You miss out a lot on that. So that's something to think about when building this sort of item, especially on champions like Silas can kind of miss out on that. Typically built as a first item. The reason it's typically built as a first item is, again, because these components, it doesn't give you too much damage. One thing to actually note about Protobelt though, guys, I didn't really mention before, is that Protobelt active is it's undervalued. If you're very close range to a target and you can hit all the bolts onto the enemy, it does a lot of burst damage. That's why when you walk up to wave, it just one-shots the wave because all of them hit. But if you're only hitting like one or two of the bolts, then it really doesn't do too much damage. So something to keep in mind, guys, is make sure you're really trying to find ways to close the gap to maximize your chances of actually hitting the bolts. And that's why if you camp a bush and someone face checks you and you get all the bolts onto an enemy, it does a lot of burst damage. And lastly here, guys, it's a very cheap item. It complements champions that really want to push the pace of the game. That's why it makes so much sense on champions like Echo for so many reasons, but largely pushing the pace of the game. And lastly here, can proc Rylai's. That's another reason why I really liked it on Annie, is because I could use my Proto Belt, get in range, slow them with Rylai's, which would actually get me in range to use my ultimate and use my full combo. Now for Rod of Ages, guys, it's generally seen on champions that require durability to get their damage off in a fight, usually sustained damage champions. And this is why we see it a lot with Kassadin, we see it a lot with champions like Ryze, because they have such low range, they need to get into the action, and if they're versing a very high burst oriented team composition, you need that durability to be able to get your damage off or to have that threat. And if you're just going to get one shot, there's no point. So they're the sorts of champions, same as TF, like you need your W range is literally auto attack range, so you're getting very close up and personal, that sort of thing. Now if I am playing Ryze and I'm versing a very low threat comp, very low damage composition, sorry, with not much burst, then I'll just skip Rod of Ages and go straight into my Seraphs. And what I like about this item, it has very flexible components. If I need to minimize the early lane, I can easily go Catalyst, which gives me access to this unique passive here. It gives me access to HP and mana. Yes, it doesn't give me any AP, but that's the great thing about it. If I need AP, I can just always go Blasting Wand. If I need threat, I can go Blasting Wand. But if I just want to minimize and scale, I can just go for my Catalyst, which is kind of the reason why I really like Proto Belt as well. It's in the same vein there. And then lastly, generally seen with champions that they're both very mana reliant with low cooldowns. And the reason that's the case, again, is because you get a lot of mana here, both as it's stacking up, but more importantly, restore mana based off damage taken, plus you're restoring health equivalent to 20% of mana spent. So if you're spamming abilities, spamming mana in team fights, these long extended team fights, you're getting a lot of healing, which again, why it synergizes very well with champions like Ryze. Now for Hex Tech Gunblade, guys. Not a common item due to its hybrid nature, and you must really get value from both stats. Like, for obvious reasons, if you're buying it only for the AP or only for the AD, you're not going to get much value. Pretty self-explanatory. It costs a lot of gold, 3,400, which makes it hard to complete, which results in one of the largest power spikes. That's why, as champions like Akali or Katarina, they're quite underwhelming if they just have Cutlass and Revolver, but as soon as they actually upgrade it and get this item, they are very, very threatening. So something to think about. And the great thing about this item is that the active is point and click, right? It's very rare in the game that you have a point and click damage ability that both offers utility and damage. Like, that's very, very rare. And it scales quite well. It scales with 30% HP, does a decent amount of damage, and it slows the target. It's just a very solid active item. This active is the reason why, one of the biggest reasons why this item is so amazing, both defensively and offensively. And lastly, guys, it's one of the few items that actually have Drain. We'll talk about Drain or healing a little bit later on, but it's a very rare stat, and it's really hard to put a value on healing because healing is always, as a concept, is very complex. We'll talk about that later, but just something to think about. It's a very hard to value stat because it really depends on how you're using it, how often you're able to use it, how it's really affecting that specific game state. Now for the AD users, we're going to go through some of these lethality items. We've got Youmuu's Ghostblade first, one of my personal favorites due to how versatile the movement speed is. It can be both used as a gap closer, as a roaming tool, as a skirmish tool to dodge skill shots, and it can be also used to escape ganks. It's very, very flexible, and its utility is one of the biggest reasons why it's built so commonly in the mid lane. And for example, if you think about Zed, if Zed didn't have access to this movement speed, he would very rarely be able to start combos with his R. He would always have to start the fight with his W, which really isn't what he wants to do all the time. So, very great item for that. You can use the active for increased tempo bases coming out of base. It also, people don't understand that it also has unit collision. The active, the ghost, gives you unit collisions, ignoring unit collisions. So, when you're playing champions like Zed and they're trying to escape you, kite you, play through the minions, it can be very, very helpful for that as well. And it's common because it has such a nice balance between utility and damage, and also gives you CDR, which is extremely crucial for any assassin. And I won't go over the lethality. It's pretty self-explanatory why these items are built on assassins. Now for Duskblade, guys. So Duskblade is actually the highest damage lethality item, both in terms of raw AD, in terms of lethality, and obviously having access to this unique passive as well. And it's generally what makes AD assassins threatening in mid-game. Like, when I have just Youmuu's as Zed, I feel relatively threatening, but when I have Youmuu's and Duskblade, that is when my threat really goes through the roof. Now, one tool of Duskblade that not many people know about is that you can actually use the passive to see whether you're on vision or not. So let's just say you're roaming in the jungle and you're looking to make a pick. If you don't have access to Night Stalker, then it will tell you that it's a sign that you're definitely on vision. So it's a great way, similar to Umbleglaive in a way, like you know if there's a ward there or not. Not many people know that. You can literally look at the little icon, it'll go on cooldown or off cooldown. Try that in a practice tool. It's a very great way to see if you're on vision or not. It is not rushed by many champions due to the lack of utility, although it can be rushed on champions like Qiyana because they already have utility from the grass queue anyway. And it is very hard to find uses for this passive as well because you need to be coming from out of vision, and when you're in the early laning phase, you're literally in vision all the time. The only exception is Qiyana grass queue, which is why it is rushed on. One of the reasons why it's rushed on Qiyana. Now for Umbleglaive, guys, it's the lowest damage lethality item, both in terms of lethality and attack damage. And but it is very cheap, guys. And one of the things I say about this item is that it is one of the highest skill cap items in the game, which is why I don't really recommend it for low elo. Like, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan where I am roaming for this. I know this bot lane matchup. I'm not playing for my lane. I'm roaming. I'm clearing vision. I'm generating threat on the map. It can be rushed with champions like Zed and Qiyana, but it does come at a massive cost because you literally get 10 less AD, 9 less lethality comparatively to Duskblade. Which, you know, you got to weigh up the cost. It's like, well, I'm going to get to my Yomu's on my Duskblade anyway. Would I rather delay that spike? I don't know. This is why I personally do not like this item, and I don't buy it on Zed at all. I know Z99 goes this item occasionally, but that's in high elo Korean solo queue where the utility of clearing vision will get utilized not just by you, but by everyone else on the map. It synergizes very well with Zombie Ward for obvious reasons and roam-oriented champions like Qiyana and Zed. You either must have a lot of jungle threat from your jungler, or be actively able to roam towards a heavy trading side lane to make use of this item. Yes, it is 500 gold cheaper, but, you know, just personally not a fan. Now for Blade of the Ruin King, guys, probably one of the most prevalent meta items of this entire season, and it has a lot of differing strengths, guys. The main one is that it allows for extremely high kill threat versus low mobility champions. And the reason this is the case is because the active on it not only slows the enemy, it actually speeds you up as well. So it allows you to close the gap, stick on the opponent. Even if they use flash, you can a lot of the time just catch up to them. It allows you to escape ganks because you can use it on the jungler. You get movement speed and they're slowed. It just has so many use cases, and it's point and click. There's no skill shot involved. It's very, very easy to use, very amazingly efficient and amazing active, sorry. It gives you at least a minimum of 55 damage, but usually much greater because people having much more health than that. And note, guys, just a bit of math here just to talk about the damage. If you're a melee champion, you're going to be doing 12% of current HP, which is around 12 damage per 100 HP, which is around 120 damage per 1,000 HP, which is ridiculous. And then for ranged champions, you get 8%, so 8% of, 8 damage per 100 HP, which leads to 80 damage per 1,000, which is still relatively decent, but majority of the time it's taken on melee champions. Now, the last thing you need to understand about this item, guys, is that the 12% lifesteal doesn't just apply to the raw damage that you're doing with the item, it applies to the bonus physical on-hit damage as well. And if you buy Spirit Visage, you get 69% increased healing total because you're getting increased healing from the lifesteal of the auto attacks and of the bonus damage. So it gives you a ridiculous amount of healing. And for obvious reasons, guys, it's very good into any champion that stacks health. So if you see it as Scion or someone who doesn't really know how to build, they have a lot of HP, you can basically counter them with one single item, guys. So very, very important to understand. Now for early defensives, guys. So now that we have a bit more understanding of the first core item choices for AP champions, we now know that either, number one, that they give a considerable amount of help in the mana or HP department to help manage and control the lane state, or they give you so much early threat that it makes up for the lack of resources. So if we take a look at Banshees and Zhonya's, they don't really tick either box. They don't give you enough threat, and they don't really give you any resources to manage the waves or deal with your opponents. And you remember, guys, Offense is your defense a lot of the time. If you have something like a Lost Chapter, you're going to have so much, not only AP and CDR, you're also going to have a lot of mana, which gives you so much freedom to not only use your abilities aggressively, but use your abilities to thin the wave and use your offense as defense. So it's very important you understand that. And this is the main reason we don't rush items like Banshees or rush items like Zhonya's. And lastly here, guys, defensive went ahead. This is one of my favorite personal philosophies on the game. A lot of players do it intuitively, but it is important just to highlight it as a separate point. When you're ahead in the game, one of the biggest misconceptions is that you should build more damage, right? You build more damage, more AP. No, when you're ahead, a lot of the time, it's better to take the time to build a defensive item because you already have enough AP because you're getting so far up in levels, you're getting magic penetration when other people don't have any resist, that sort of thing. You can actually afford to go a third item or a second item Banshees, which nearly makes you unkillable because not only are you already doing so much damage because they don't really have many defensive stats yet, you're now unkillable because you have this spell shield or you have this MR or you have this stasis here. So defenses went ahead as a philosophy is very important to understand because it can basically make it so there's no counterplay. That's why if you see a champion get really far ahead in the top lane and they build an early GA, it's like, holy crap, how am I going to deal with this person? Now we've got to talk a little bit about Oblivion Orb. This is a bit of a controversial item because not really many people understand how flat penetration works. But now that we've really covered flat penetration, we can go a little bit deeper here. Now, Oblivion Orb is great as a snowball item when you get very ahead in the early game. And it is very effective when you are the sole form of AP on your team. It's a very weak purchase when either A, you are behind, which is a little bit situational because if you are behind but you know that the enemy doesn't have any MR and you just want threat on a specific target. So if I'm playing like, say, you know, burst-oriented Syndra and I get a little bit far behind, but I know none of them are going to get any MR and I just want to be a one-shot bot for the enemy AD carry or enemy suicide for the enemy control mage, then a lot of the time I will build it because it will increase my threat on that target if they're not going to build that resist. So it really does depend, but I would say 90% of the time it is not good when you're behind. If the enemy's stacking MR, it's not good because then you'd rather get raw AP in the meantime and then get a Void Staff later on for the percent pen. Or if you revolve around sustained damage, in which, again, you should be getting something like a Liandry's and then like a Void Staff later on. Because it's very much burst. It's a very burst-oriented item. And when you're looking to burst one target. And squishies, for example. And it's relevant when you are buying Sorks. It synergizes very well when you're buying Sorks, when you're really stacking up that flat magic pen, getting a very early form of damage, and trying to really increase your threat in the early portion of the game. Or when Grievous Wounds is absolutely mandatory, which we'll get into in a second. And note, guys, you pay a very heavy price for the 15 magic penetration, right? If we take a look at this, we're paying 400 for the Ruby Crystal, 435 for the Amplifying Tomb, and 765 for this magic penetration, essentially, right? Compare that with Sorks. Sorks, it's 800, right? Because you've already paid 300 is for the tier 1 boots. 800 is for the rest of the gold. You get 20 movement speed, which is a lot, and you get 18 magic pen. 18 for 800. So you're getting 765 for basically 15 magic pen only. Whereas Sorks, you're literally getting 20 MS and you're getting 18 magic pen. More magic pen than you would with Oblivion Orb. So you can already see here how Sorks is already starting to see how Sorks is a very efficient item. So moving on. Now we need to talk a little bit about healing in Modern League. Now, Drain, I'll quickly read it here. Drain is a conjectural term for various healing effects that are based on damage dealt, but they're not really spell vamp or lifesteal, okay? Now, this is something that really got introduced, I believe, Season 8, and this is actually one of the biggest reasons why Ravenous Hunter is so strong and taken on so many champions, okay? So, Ravenous Hunter, one of the guys who helped me with this video, who's literally said to me, Ravenous Hunter is literally taken on like 80 plus champions, right? Now, Ravenous Hunter, the healing heals off abilities only, but it does include items and on hit. But Ravenous is commonly paired with Conqueror, right? And it's one of the biggest reasons why Conqueror is so popular, because Conqueror increases your damage, which increases your healing. Now, there's only two other ways to get Drain in the game. The only other two other ways is Death Dance and Gunblade, right? And if you think about that, they're two of some of the most expensive items in the entire game. So it's actually very hard to get access to Drain or healing from abilities. Very, very amazing stat. And it's very hard to put a cost on something like this because healing it's just very situational. If you're in a situation where you get a lot of value from healing, then you can't put a cost on it. Then it's infinite. But if you're not getting much value and you're just getting bursted, then this sort of thing maybe won't have too much value. Now the last thing here, guys, is that yes, you do only get the full 40% healing when you triggered off single target abilities, whereas AoE abilities trigger only for a third of it at 4.3%. But if your first 3 targets, you actually get the full 14% healing, but if you're hitting more than 3 targets, you're getting more than 14%. So it doesn't matter if you have a lot of AoE abilities in your kit. If you're hitting multiple targets, it does not matter at all. And another thing you need to think about, guys, if you go for an invade, right? You have the base 1.5 healing, and you get, what, 3 stacks. That's 7.5. So you're already at 9% healing at level 1. If that happens, the game is completely different. 9% healing off abilities at level 1 is insane. That's why what happens with Karthus, right? If you go into an early skirmish, you get 3 stacks early on in the game, you're already at 9%. You can heal off 1 camp to full HP, and you're never going to drop below full HP for the rest of the game, essentially. So Drain is a very weird interaction. It is something that you should consider, and it's basically why Ravenous Hunter is so incredibly important. So given we covered healing or drain, we also need to talk about healing reduction. So there's a few types of healing reduction, or a few ways to get it. The first one is Morello's. It's quite expensive, 3,000 gold, very hard to get, and it requires you to constantly deal magic damage, right? You need to be constantly proccing magic damage to even get access to the healing reduction. And we'll talk a bit in the next slide about the benefits of Morello's though. Bramble Vest, a lot cheaper, 1,000 gold. It's the only option that doesn't really give you offensive stats, but it only works if you're getting attacked, so it can be ignored unless you have a taunt. Executioners, on the other hand, is probably the easiest to obtain because it's so incredibly cheap, but it will result in less armor pen with Mortal Reminder, because then you won't have access to LDR. Ignite is probably the most reliable way for healing reduction. It's universal, everyone can take it. It requires you, but it does require you to get in range at very close quarters. And it basically has to be off cooldown. Like it has what, like 180-second cooldown, and it only lasts 5 seconds as well. So as you can see here, healing reduction is quite awkward to purchase, and it really is a team effort. If you are trying to shut down a healing member, you do need the front line to build Bramble. You do need the AD carry to get Executioners. You do need your mid lane to get Morellos. It's a team effort. You can't rely on one person to constantly proc healing reduction or Grievous Wound, onto the enemy. And note, guys, all healing reductions are 40% except for Katarina's R and Kled's Q. Katarina's R is actually 60% healing reduction, which is something I didn't even know, which is pretty insane as well. So that's actually why Katarina's ult. Screw Katarina, she's just OP, man. Screw that champion. Now, actually, while we're on that topic, let's actually quickly talk about another controversial thing, which is Morellonomicon versus Liandry's. So, Morellonomicon, we know a little bit more now about the Grievous Wounds, we know more about the flat magic penetration, and we also know about how hard it is to actually build this item. So, the 3 redeeming factors of this item are the flat magic pen being a really hard stat to purchase, healing reduction also being a hard stat to purchase for mid laners, and also HP being kind of difficult to itemize if you're not already building Roar within your kit. And as we know, if you do want something like some base resistances, you're getting an early Seekers, getting an early flat armor or cloth armor, or null magic mantle with Merc Treads. Sitting on a bit of HP can drastically make you a lot more tankier. That's something to think about. That's actually why a lot of people, especially in Korea, they just default to building something like Morellonomicon because it's such an easy way to build HP. Healing reduction aside, this item has value as a mid-game skirmish item due to its durability it offers, which again is quite underrated, especially if you're buying early resistances, but it's commonly seen with resistances and especially with low range mages. That's why you see it a lot of the time on champions like Ahri, because they're very low range, they need to get into the action, or even the Zoe one trick in Korea a lot of the time grows Morellonomicon second item, even if he doesn't need the healing reduction, is because he wants that flat magic pen, he wants to have threat on the enemy squishies, and he's very low range. The way he plays Zoe is very low range, in the action, skirmish oriented, utilizing his W, that sort of thing. So that's the resistance element of it. So now for Liandry's. Now, Liandry's is recommended when you have low cooldowns and you're taking extended fights, okay, guys? It's solid into heavy frontline due to percent max HP damage. But Haunting, guys, as a component, sorry, isn't really as impactful as Oblivion Orb. Therefore, it is quite underwhelming until it's actually completed. This is why it's a big turner for a lot of people. It's like, you see the 1500 that it costs to get Haunting, guys, but then you see the 1600 for Oblivion Orb, plus you get the 15 M-Pen, which on a lot of mid laners means a lot, especially in the early portion of the game when you're building this item. So it is something to think about. For me personally, I only build Leandros when I know 100% I'm going to be taking long, extended fights. It's something you basically need to tick that box if it's worth building this item. And it also does synergize pretty good with Archangels because, again, you get more mana, you got the CDR, using your abilities more often, you're able to stack this up very quickly and get those ticks going. Now for Medjai's, guys. So Medjai's is such a unique and important item. I really believe it deserves its own slide. So you should generally only build Medjai's. Yes, it is a bit of an absolute, but I live by this. Generally only build Medjai's on champions that already build an early Dark Seal. 10 stacks is the threshold that, in my opinion, warrants upgrading because you get immediate access to the bonus movement speed. And you do need to take into account how snowbally your champion is and how vulnerable your champion is in that specific game. That's why we see it a lot on champions like Echo or Fizz, because not only are they naturally building Dark Seal anyway because they start Corrupting Pot, going back for early tempo bases, getting a Dark Seal, it's because they're very mobile, they're very hard to kill. Echo through his W, his mobility, his R, Fizz's E, and his mobility with Q, very hard to kill. That's why those champions do like Medjai's, because once they're ahead, they are so hard to shut down. But comparatively, if you're buying Medjai's on a champion like Orianna or Syndra, you need to be very careful because even if you're ahead, you're very immobile. You're an immobile mage. So unless you're versing literally zero threat and you're very, very confident, I would not be building this item. Although, guys, you can build this item on some artillery mages. That's why I like to build it on champions like Xerath or Kog'Maw or something, for example, where I get some early stacks, I get to 10 stacks, and I'm so high range, and I know I'm versing low threat, I can just sit back, relax, stack it up. They're not going to get anywhere near me. Now, I also wanted to do a slide on Stopwatch because I think it can be literally game-winning when bought in the correct situation. So here are a few notes to help you understand or get your head around when you should be buying this item. So if you're already buying a GA or a Zhonya's, or it's in your natural build path, and there's a next major objective fight, whether it's around a Baron, a Rift Herald, a Dragon, an Invade, then buying a Stopwatch before that fight can be massive. Because a lot of the time, people aren't clicking tab and checking what your items are all the time and updating it, being like, oh, they're not going to say, oh, he has Stopwatch now, like, I can't dive on him. Like, it's very rare that's the case. Yes, in a higher elo, it does happen, but in lower elo, you see it all the time where someone buys a Stopwatch, they didn't click tab, and then a Kha'Zix jumps on him or a Camille dives on him, and then just Stopwatches, and then they just win the fight off of it. So it can literally be very, really, really impactful, similar to this second slide. If you're versing very heavy threat assassins and you're already building Zhonya's or something, building a Stopwatch even before your Codex can allow you to be more impactful in the fight, because you can use your gap closer or your escape aggressively rather than having to hold on to it and being too scared to use it and just having to rely on your flash. You have an insane form of self-peel in which you can use your gap closer aggressively and wait for it to get back off cooldown while you're in stasis. Or late game, you can even buy a Stopwatch even if you already have a Zhonya's already. So you have two forms of stasis, and it can again be literally game-changing versus very heavy dive compositions, or if you're playing a diver who wants to buy a lot of time. You also see this on champions like Echo, Lissandra, Diana, who are diving into the backline and want to buy so much time. So we need to cover a little bit more theory here, guys. I want to quickly talk about abusing power troughs and spikes. So far, we've seen the importance of really understanding the differences in items and how they can largely affect a champion's relative strength to other champions in the game. Now, how can we use this information to abuse mistakes or itemization mistakes from the enemy? Now, the first way is to identify greedy or slow itemization and act accordingly. So, you see someone who starts Cull, or starts Dark Seal, or buys an Amp Tomb over a Dorant, or they build an early tier over early AP, or they build no defenses versus flat penetration. You should identify that and be like, wait, how is he going to get away with that? I'm not letting him get away with that. Maybe you trade more aggressively, push the pace of the game, go for a trade that you wouldn't have otherwise gone for. Maybe it would have been a little bit counterintuitive with your champion, but you can get away with it because they just haven't built accordingly. They built really, I guess, greedy scaling stats when you've got raw AD or raw magic pen or raw flat lethality, sorry. So you really need to be constantly clicking tab, assessing the items, because that's going to largely change how you're going to play the game. Now, number 2, push the pace of the game to force the enemy on awkward gold amounts. This is very common when you're versing champions like Orianna, or I guess even any artillery mage. So for example, let's just say you're playing Echo versus Victor, right? And you know Victor really wants to get to his hex score, which is very expensive. Well, it's like, what, 1250? Or even if you're playing like Echo into something like a Nivea or a Vel'Koz or a Xerath, you just push the pace of the game, heavy trade, heavy trade, heavy trade. You're already starting Corrupting Bot anyway. You go back for an early Darksteel. Yeah, so what? You had to maybe miss a few creeps, but he also has to miss a few creeps. But he doesn't get as much value from the first item base as you do. Imagine being Victor, delaying your first Hex Core, having to buy a Tier 1 Boots or a Darksteel when you didn't even start a Corrupting Bot. You feel awful, right? So this is where you can start to get creative, when you not only understand your mini game, but understand the enemy's mini game and really start to identify their power troughs and their power spikes and play around them. Number 3, abusing the lack of health pots. I talk a lot about that in my coaching sessions. Whenever you come back out of base and you see the enemy, you should click tab, check if they have pots, check if they have pinks. If they have no pinks, you basically know they're never going to have river control. If they have no refillable, then you just poke them a few times and then they're screwed. Like, there's so many ways to abuse these people. There's so much poor itemization. It's very, very easy to abuse, guys. And the last one, abusing the lack of mana and overly defensive build paths. So this is why, if you see an Orianna, you're playing Zed, and you see an Orianna who rushes a Seekers, don't panic. He's just not going to have damage. You can just keep poking him, let him waste his mana because he doesn't have any mana regen. He's not going to have Lost Chapter. His Lost Chapter is delayed completely. Play around, drain his mana, then you can look for an aggressive trade. You do the same thing all the time when people don't build mana. They build overly defensive items. Very, very easy to abuse, guys. Now, this video is a hell of a lot of theory, and my goal is that you guys use this theory in combination with your feel of power spikes and troughs to adapt your gameplay. Now, what do I mean by adapting your gameplay? Number 1, if you know you're in a power trough, then it's okay to give pressure or minimize, knowing you can't afford to get behind or delay that spike even longer. That's why if I'm playing something like, Xerath, yes, I'm okay. I'm accepting reality that I'm not going to have pressure here, but I know if I can minimize, farm really well, get to my Lost Chapter, I will have pressure. Okay, so I sit back, relax. It's okay to say no to a fight. It's okay to say no to a dragon fight. It's okay to say no to a gank, ping them back, no to roams. But because I know if I minimize my power trough by farming really well, I can increase the chances of me getting to my power spike, where then I can be impactful. And a lot of people, they don't say no, they compensate, they get even further behind, delay their power spikes, and then they just never find a way to get back into the game. Number 2, if you know you were spiked, then you should be actively adapting your gameplay in terms of how you're playing your waves, how aggressive you're trading to maybe potentially call more objectives, look for more dives on side lanes, look for more invades, really push the pace of the game. Don't just hit a spike and play the same way. You should be actively thinking about, oh, I'm strong now. What can I do with that strength? Number 3, if you're not aware of your spikes, you will find yourself all the time actively tarnishing your chances of carrying the game. See this all the time. People they're playing aggressive on their item troughs. They're heavy trading when they want to delay. They should be delaying, extending the laning phase. They should be, when they are strong, they don't really do anything, or they're playing too defensively, giving a lot of pressure when they don't need to. You have to be aware of your spikes, guys. And note, the best players find creative ways to both abuse their power spike, which actually, and actually get them faster to their power spike and actually cover power troughs. So they're very good at identifying, okay, I'm really strong off this item, but okay, given I need to delay them, I need to minimize, they find creative ways to do so, whether it's through tempo bases, whether it's through leaning properly, whether it's through pinging way in advance, whether it's through trading in a certain way or holding onto a certain ability. Very creative way. There's a lot of ways out there, guys, if you really get into the champion mastery to, again, delay and minimize during those power troughs. Now for second core items, guys, this is where the first major forms of build adaptations really come into play. And here is what we really need to consider when building our second item of the game. The first one, How much threat are you under? Is defense required, or can you opt in for more damage? Number 2, and we spoke a lot about that before, so I won't go too heavy on that. Number 2, what is the damage spread? Do I need more M-Pen? Do I need more armor pen? Do I need percent penetration? Damage spread on the enemy team. Are they stacking one resistance? Do I get a lot of value out of getting a Seekers? Do I not get any value? That sort of thing. Level of durability. How tanky is the enemy team? Do they have any resistances? Are they building HP? What are they building? What are they not building? Because that would dictate how much. Do I need raw AP? Do I need a Void Staff? Do I need a Sorks? Should I go for an early Oblivion Orb? Or even third item, do I need to go for Void Staff? Or can I go for a third item Rabadons over that? The way your champion's playing fights. Okay, do I need to have more burst? Or are the fights largely being played around front to back sustained damage fights? Do I need a Liandry's? And just overall game pace. How fast is the game getting played? Do I need to place or like build something that is a little bit earlier spiking? Or can I get away with a very expensive item? So let's quickly talk about defense versus offense in your second item, guys. So defense can come in multiple forms. It can be through utility, like GLP with slows, Zhonya's active with stasis, or just spell shields. But it can also come through HP, like Morello's and Liandry's, or it can come through resistances, like Seekers, Banshees, and Wit's End, okay? Defense is secondary, second item, if number 1, you are versing heavy dive, and it will really aid your damage output, So if it's actively changing the way you can position or get damage off in a fight, then building defense second is very effective. It always has to come from that proactive mindset and that very aggressive mindset. You can't think of defensive items in this very bitch mindset. You got to think, okay, how is this going to allow me to do more damage? Will it not? If I build defensive, will I still lose the team fight? Would I rather risk getting more damage, having more threat, but then I have to play just very calculated? That sort of thing. You have to be really, really thinking about that. Because if you just get one shot and you're just going to die anyway, then you do have to build defensively. This is what I'm saying here. You just straight up can't survive fights. So then you just do actually have to build defensive items. And lastly, if staying alive for an extended fight is coherent with your champion's identity, say for example, you're Orianna and you've got Liandry's or whatever, and maybe you need to stay alive for a long period of time. You're playing Cassio, you need to stay alive because you're not burst oriented, then maybe I do need defenses because I get a lot of value from staying alive because I get way more damage off. Again, it's coming from that proactive offensive mindset. And note, guys, some champs' offense is so important to their identity that there is no point ever buying a defensive item, right? If you're playing Zed, you're playing Rumble, you're playing Kiana, who cares if you're alive, right? It's better for you to go in there, one-shot the enemy AD carry, trade 1-for-1 than it is to stay alive, not have any threat, because you're just going to lose a front-to-back fight anyway. This is where you really got to start thinking about your champion's identity and what you're trying to achieve in that game. Now for damage spread, guys, if you're on the team with 4 sources of the same damage type, or maybe even it's triple AP topside or triple AD topside, then you need to adapt your build, okay? This is a sign that you may need to build second item, a Void Staff, or a Last Whisper, or go Sorks over another type of boot. But something you need to know, guys, if you are significantly ahead, even if you have a lot of AP on your team or a lot of AD, then it's probably better just to continue with your standard build path because it's so early in the game that they're not really going to have enough MR to get to that breakpoint or armor to get to that breakpoint anyway. So that's something to also think about. And the other note here, guys, if you're versing a very squishy team composition overall, then they're not going to be able to build resistances or enough HP to make the resistances worth it anyway. So again, it's better just continue with your build path, but it's very different, which is my other point down here. If you're versing a lot of bruisers and tanks, they actually punish imbalanced damage spread the most because they have a lot of access to these tankier items. They have a lot of access to HP, and then it can be very, very painful. But it works the same way for you guys as well defensively. If you're versing, you see in Champ Select, they have like 4 AD on their team and only 1 AP, then you should be actively thinking, okay, this is probably a game where sitting on an early like Cloth Armor or an early Seekers or an early Tabis probably will be quite valuable because it will actually help me position very aggressively in skirmishes. Now for the second core items, guys, we've got the AP users. We're starting with Rabadon's Death Cap here, guys. We all love it. We all know it. It's great as a second item when your champion has solid AP scaling, 70% plus, or if you get utility from AP like Vlad, like Ori, like Lulu, like Karma, because they not only get more damage, but they get more utility through the healing from Vlad, through the shielding from Orianna, Lulu, and Karma. That's why this item is so effective on those champions. That's why I also personally love it on Orianna the most as a second item. It does allow that defense as your offense approach or concept to come about, and if it doesn't, then you should be seriously considering potentially getting HP or more defenses, whether it's through Banshees or Zhonya's, or even like a Liandry's or a Morello's with HP, because you're just going to be too squishy otherwise, or you're going to be you're so high range that they have no threat on you anyway. So maybe you're playing like Xerath into a low engage comp, you can go straight from Ludens into Rabadon's Death Cap, because you don't need durability anyway, because no one's touching you, and even if they do get onto you, you're going to die anyway. So you rather just go all in on your identity, all damage, artillery mages. This can really work, and it can be very difficult to itemize, guys. If you think about the components, it's literally two expensive items, 1250, 1250, right? Not only are they giving you nothing but AP, they give you no durability, no utility. It's incredibly expensive, takes up a lot of slots, and the total item is 3,600. So you've got to be very carefully planning how you're going to purchase this item. Thinking about the mini game when you get back to lane, okay? How am I going to get to 1250 here? What do I need to do to get 1250? What sort of trades? What do I need to say yes to or no to in order to get 1250 on this recall? Do I need to find jungle camps? How much gold? How many waves do I need? Very, very hard to build, but if you can build it, it has one of the largest spikes out of any item, which is my last point there. Now for Lichbane, guys, as a second item, it's very snowbally, and it's usually built in two situations. Number one, it's built on assassins who are already have utility or durability from their first item, like a proto belt or something like that. Or if they have so much threat or reliability of proccing the passive that makes the value of this item really, really huge. This is why we see it on champions like Fizz, because they can proc it so reliably, or even like Echo. Or two, guys, on mages that have relatively low range, that are very great at snowballing when they can actually reliably proc it, whether in a low range matchup, So Zoe is great when you're playing maybe Zoe versus something like Ahri, even like Zoe versus Sylas or something, very low range matchups. Lichbane can be a decent second item because it does so much damage. It's a very snowball oriented item, but you do got to be careful because it again doesn't really give you any durability. Now for Zhonya's Hourglass, building Zhonya's as a second item is common for any melee AP assassin because it allows for a second rotation of abilities and complements diving, right? So if you think about Echo or Fizz for an example, let's just say they go in, they use a W, E, Q combo, whatever, go for a one shot. The E has a relatively high cooldown, both of them, which is their key bread and butter, I guess, mobility ability. While they're in stasis, they can actually wait for it to come back up and then go again and do a whole nother rotation. So it's great for allowing a whole second rotation in a team fight. And if you're diving sides like a lot of these champions do, it can be great for tanking the tower, using your stasis, getting out quite freely while your E is on coming off cooldown. Building it second as a mage is not really recommended due to it severely lowering your threat. But, like I said before, against heavy dive comps like Kha'Zix, Camille, Zed, it is very strong, and it is a clean way of getting to your 40% CDR with Lost Chapter item, like your Ludens, GLP, whatever, plus Transcendence. Now for Banshees, same concept as Zhonya's largely, seen as a second item against very heavy AP burst compositions, or CC-oriented champions like Fizz, like Zoe, like Syndra. So a lot of these champions that rely on CC to navigate their entire kit, like Fizz, Zoe, Syndra, they need to hit the bubble. They need to hit the stun to do the rest of their damage. Or even Annie, very, very effective at shutting down those champions. And because Banshees obviously is built out of null magic mantle, it can be great at minimizing early magic penetration, flat magic penetration, and champions that need to 100 to 0 you, where that is part of their identity as a champion. Again, not really recommended unless it meaningfully changes how you navigate fights. It must be built through that proactive mindset. And note, guys, it can be sometimes very underwhelming without HP. This is really why it is better as a third item after Morello's or Liandry's, or if you have like a Dorian's Ring or double Dorians in your build. Now for Rylai's, very niche item, but I did want to include it. It is great as a second item when your kit revolves around sustained damage, but it is usually built second, third in combination with Liandry's, okay? Because Liandry's burn actually keeps ticking the slow, which then increases the damage of Liandry's, because Liandry's actually gets increased damage from slows as well. Now, note, guys, it does not give any CDR, no magic penetration, so as a standalone item, unless the slows are meaningfully increasing your threat and allowing you to get more damage off, it is not valuable whatsoever. This is why we only really see it on champions like Cassio or Kog'Maw and Annie, Well, Cassio and Cogmore are kind of tied together where it actually allows you to hit subsequent damage, whereas Annie is good because Tibbers just consistently procs it. It works really well with Leandri's. It just synergizes with the way Tibbers works in team fights. So it is something to think about. Very niche item. You're not really going to be building it on many champs. Now for Spellbinder, guys. I really like Spellbinder, and it is a very misunderstood item, okay? Number one, you typically want to be building Spellbinder when your kit has low cooldowns and can actually stack up the passive quite reliably. This is why we generally see it on champions like Orianna or Syndra, but you do have to note that teammates and enemies as well can help you stack it. So it's anyone in the area, in the vicinity, which is a very large range, 1800 range, whenever anyone casts ability, it actually stacks it up as well, which is why in mid-game, if you're Orianna grouping with the team a lot, it can be very easy to stack up, which is something that not many people think about as well. If you know fights are going to be played very burst-oriented, 100 to 0 or just one target, then the next, then Spellbinder is something you should consider because it largely gives you a massive amount of burst once you stack it up and use the active on it. And the other thing that not many people think about is because of the movement speed. Right? So it has a massive amount of gap closing potential and mobility. So if gap closing ability or mobility is missing within your kit, whether you're playing Syndra, then movement speed can be very helpful. Not just the active, but just the passive. It's 10% movement speed, which is something that is very hard to build. Movement speed as a stat is actually very rare and very hard to build. It's very undervalued. And it's actually a high amount of it. It's actually 10%, which is very considerable. Another note here, guys. When your role is to deal with heavy frontline, then I wouldn't recommend this item. This is when I'd recommend something like Rabadon's and Void and Leandri's, these sorts of items. This is generally an item that you want to be building when you're versing relatively squishy opponents. And the other note here, guys, is that it does not give you CDR, it does not give you HP, so you must either already be very safe due to your range advantage or already have plenty of self-peel within your composition. This is typically why it's built as a third or fourth item, when you already have durability and you already have utility from your other items. So generally you want to be building a second lethality item, guys, when either number one, you have snowballed off the first lethality item, which is, 90% of the time this will be the case, and you're actually trying to push the pace of the game, which makes sense because lethality just doesn't really scale well as a stat because as people get more levels, they get more base resistances. Number two, you haven't snowballed, but you need to all in on your identity regardless to have threat on the enemy AD carry, okay? But it is important to note, guys, that you need to be always checking total armor values because it differs champion to champion, whereas MR doesn't, okay? So if you're looking to build lethality, you should be constantly checking who's building armor, what are their armor values? Do I need to be going a second or third lethality item, or should I be going something like a Black Cleaver or a Last Whisper? Number three, you haven't snowballed, but you don't have threat on the enemy AD carry, but you are the only form of AD source on your team. So no one else on the enemy team, or they can't really be stacking armor because you're the only AD on your team. And which means that you still get a lot of value from lethality even though you're behind or you haven't really snowballed. And the other reason you should be thinking about is that if you're versing squishies, then lethality really is actually quite handy because even if they do get a bit of armor, they're not really going to have much HP, so they're not going to be too tanky. So lethality against squishy champions in general, again, even if they want to build resistances, it's not going to be too effective. That's something to think about as well. And the last note here, guys, Edge of Night does not give CDR, okay? Edge of Night does not give CDR, but it has two massive defensive aspects. It has the shield and it has the HP. But guys, its main weakness is that it only has 10 lethality, and by the time you're building it, it's basically useless. So you only want to be building this item if defensive is a very important thing for you. Generally, I like to build it if I'm playing something like Zed into a Zoe, where yes, I do need that lethality. They're not building too much armor, but I also need the defensive ability to block that initial form of CC. It's a great way to generate threat, even if you're versing very high CC compositions. Now for the second core items, guys, and the AD users, we have Wit's End, which is a bit of a misunderstood item. You generally want to be building it against heavy magic damage matchups when you're playing an auto attack oriented champion, whether it's Aurelia into Akali or Yasuo into Syndra. Now, something that not many people understand is that the scaling on the unique passive only really begins at level 9 and it reaches its maximum effectiveness basically at level 14. So if you're building it as a first item, you're not really going to get too much value from the unique passive at all. so it's really confuses me why people build it as a first item. It's generally only built as a second item in my opinion. Now, something also you need to think about is that it doesn't have HP, right? And because it's a resistance item, if you don't have HP, then the resistances don't really mean too much because you're just too squishy anyway. So it must be complemented with either double Dorians Blades or Dorians Blades or Black Cleaver. That's why you generally see it with Black Cleaver, because the Black Cleaver brings you the CDR, it brings you the HP. But something to think about, it's a little bit counterintuitive because Black Cleaver shreds armor, whereas the unique passive deals magic damage. So it is a little bit counterintuitive. You're not getting the max value out of Black Cleaver with this item. And other thing here, the healing is based off damage dealt, so the more penetration you have, whether it's sudden impact or whatever, the more healing you will actually get. That's something to also think about with Wit's End. Now for Black Cleaver, guys, synergizes extremely well with Bork due to the durability, because it has HP, and the CDR, which both Bork really misses, doesn't have either of those stats. And it really is complemented by the attack speed as well, because Bork gives you attack speed, which really allows you to stack up this unique passive very fast, which is great for obvious reasons. Now, the other thing that's very underutilized, very misunderstood about Black Cleaver is Rage, the Rage passive. It's very good for sticking on the opponent. It makes you very, very sticky. There's a lot of high elo Aurelia mains that love this item, and this is actually the main reason why it's seen on Darius. One of the main reasons it's seen on Darius, because you get the movement speed for 2 seconds, not just off kills, but even off assists. So if you use your Darius Q in a team fight, people die around you. You get so much movement speed. It allows you to be so incredibly sticky. Very, very, very underutilized or very undervalued unique passive. The other thing here is that it's effective against armor stacking champions, and people, you got to remember that it's like an AoE Last Whisper. It's not just for you, it's for any target attacking this champion, right? Because it's getting the reduced armor for anyone. Anyone can deal damage to this person, so very effective. It's like an AoE Last Whisper. And it's generally seen on champions with quick combos or auto attack resets due to ease of stacking the passive. That's why it's seen on champions like Lucian. And it has direct synergy with Lucian culling, because every single tick of the culling actually stacks up that passive as well. And the other form of synergy, guys, why you see it on Aurelia, especially when Aurelia builds Tmat, is because you can actually stack it up off AoE, right? So if you use your Tmat on the minions, auto attack the minions or queuing the minions, the AoE can actually stack up the unique passive on this as well. Or if you're in a team fight, you're hitting multiple people with your Tmat, with your AoE, you can actually stack it up on multiple targets at the same time, which is something that is very, very good with Aurelia. Now for Death Dance, very interesting item. One of the largest spikes of a completed item in the entire game, but because of that, it has one of the largest power troughs. So it is an incredibly expensive item, so you are largely in a power trough for a very long time. That's one of the biggest downsides of this item. It's a great item to deal with burst because it delays 30% of damage taken and 10% for ranged. I'm glad that they actually nerfed it for ranged champions. So it's very, very good against burst. But it tends to have very strict requirements for purchasing. This is actually why it has limited number of users. So, for example, it's actually used by Riven for mitigating the bleed with E, right? So you get it delays the burst, but it turns into a bleed, but you can actually largely mitigate that with the E. That's why it also synergizes very well with Sterak's, because Sterak's, the shield pops and it actually mitigates that bleed as well. Very, very effective with those specific instances. And it does synergize very well with AoE. And because Drain being such a hard stat to value and 15% heal, like I mentioned in the Drain thing, it only comes from Death Dance or Ravenous Hunter or Gunblade. It's a very hard stat to really put a number on. But yes, guys, the healing is reduced by AoE. But if you're damaging enough targets, it actually enhances the value. The same way, like I spoke about on the Drain page, if you're hitting multiple targets with AoE, then if you hit more than 3 targets, you're literally healing more than you would have otherwise on a single target ability. So something to think about. Very insane healing, but it does come at a cost, guys. Insanely big power trough. Now, I just want to quickly talk about raw damage versus pen, because I do get this question a lot. It's like, you know, how do I know when to build Rabadons versus Void Staff? How do I know when to build Last Whisper or more AD, that sort of thing? I should, you know, largely in my last slides have really covered this question, but I wanted to tie it up very neatly, okay? Simply put, guys, it is directly tied to your role in that game. If your role is to shred the front line, then obviously then you should be considering something like Void Staff, something like Leandri, something like Lord Dominic's, or Mortal Reminder. But if your identity or your role in that specific composition is to kill the backline, then no, maybe you don't need to get a Void Staff. Maybe you'd be better off with just a straight raw AP because they haven't hit that magic resist threshold or whatever. You just base AD, maybe just raw AD is just better. So you need to be thinking about your identity and who the targets you are trying to threaten in that game. Refer back to the previous penetration slides if you need to refresh your knowledge on resistance breakpoints. Now quickly for GA versus Sterak's, there's really not much to talk about here. GA is only really a 4th or 5th item that is extremely situational. It's a solid item for AD assassins, but outside of that, it's not really seen too often. And again, the one big benefit, guys, of GA is that it does build out a stopwatch. So if you do build a stopwatch later in the game, you know, GA is something that you should potentially consider. Now for Sterak's Gauge, it's only really worth buying if you get value from the Tenacity. It's more of like a package deal item because it synergizes so well with Death Dance. And if you need the durability, if you need the durability and don't need the Tenacity, then it's probably better for you to just go like a tank item or GA or something like that. I feel like if you don't need the Tenacity, I would not go this item. I feel like the Tenacity is such a big portion of what makes this item good, unless you're already synergizing it well with the Death Dance, and like I mentioned before. And the last point here, if your role is to act as a frontline and need damage, then yes, this is a viable option. I would just personally prefer just to go more tank oriented if that's the case. Now, for Ravenous Hydra versus Titanic Hydra, there are a few reasons why this item is rarely rushed nowadays. And as we mentioned before, it either must give you considerable threat, where you might as well just go lethality, or it must give you other resources like CDR, HP, mana, in which Triforce or something is just much better. Because this is a very expensive item, it's very hard to complete, and the only real beneficial, I would say, item out of these components is the Tmat. It feels really bad to sit on like a Vampire Acceptor and a Pickaxe, especially that early in the game when you don't really have any, you don't have anything else. There's no CDR, no HP, nothing like that. No attack speed. So often we see Tiamat for the early wave clear and pressure, and then after the Tiamat we build a Triforce or a Black Cleaver for durability and CDR, and then we upgrade it later on because we need all these stats. These are more important for the champions that build this item. And note, guys, it synergizes well with other lifesteal items because the AoE, you actually get AoE percentage healing. So that's why it says here, guys, if you actually read the item, lifesteal applies to 50% of cleave and splash physical damage. So if you have other lifesteal items, then you do get a considerable amount of healing within your rotation and within your team fighting. But Titanic Hydra, on the other hand, does have the HP that Ravenous doesn't, but you still don't really have that threat, and it is still ridiculously expensive. But Titanic Hydra, if you are looking to build one or the other, is much better for burst, whereas Ravenous Hydra is better for sustained long fights. Now for some niche items, guys. Athene's Unholy Grail, generally built on champions that have shields within their kit. So that's why you see it on sometimes with Orianna, with Lulu, with Karma, but only if you want to be complementing a carry jungler. If you're playing as a mid laner, you should be the main carry threat. But if you feel like you have a lot of other carry threats on that team and you want to kind of take a back seat, be more utility focused, then this is an item you should potentially consider on these champions. It's also something that I wouldn't really recommend in lower elo because I don't really trust my junglers to carry. But in high elo, you sometimes see Dopa build this item on something like Orianna when he does have a Kindred or a Graves jungle. And it is generally built alongside Ardent to get a lot of value from the shielding. And it is a very cheap item, but it doesn't really scale well. Your damage is significantly lower than if you would have otherwise went Seraph or Ludens or GLP. Twin Shadows, only built as a second item in mid to complement either GLP and that Glacial setup. If you're not going GLP, you're not doing the Glacial setup, then you should never buy this item, and your damage is significantly lessened when going this item. And if you're building it, you're basically taking a back seat, knowing that the threat and the damage is coming from other sources on the team. And GLP first, then adapt is usually my go-to approach. Like, it feels like even if I'm going Glacial, I'll definitely get GLP, and then it's like, okay, if I'm ahead, I'd rather just more damage. But if I feel like I'm taking more of a utility approach in that game and maybe my other carries are fairy fed, then I will go Twin Shadows because it really does increase my potential for making picks. It's a very, very solid item for picks. Now for Nash's Tooth, guys, there are actually very little champions in the game that actually build this item because there's not many mid lane AP champions that can actually utilize attack speed without having a significant amount of durability or range, right? And a lot of mid lane champions are predominantly burst oriented anyway, or they're spellcasters, so they don't really get much value from the attack speed. Azir is a bit of an exception. And if you are building Nash's, it's generally built alongside items that complement long extended fights like Liandry's. Now, a few more slides here, we're nearly finished. I just want to quickly talk about item synergy and anti-synergy. Certain items in the game actually synergize together, whereas others don't, right? So it's important to think of an item both in terms of like what it's actually trying to achieve in the game and how. Okay, so here are some actually examples of some large synergies. You got Archangels and Roa for the max mana. You have Blade of the Ruin King and Black Cleaver for passive stacking. Then you've also got some smaller synergies like Archangels and Liandry's, because Archangels gives you a lot of obviously CDR and a lot of mana, which allows you to constantly stack up that Liandry's because of lowering your cooldowns and giving you such a large mana pool. And then Protobelt and Rhyales, because you can actually use the active on Protobelt to slow the enemy and actually proc that Rhyalize. And then you've also got very subtle ones like Archangels and Spellbinder, where you can spam abilities, which helps you to actually stack up that Spellbinder as fast as possible. Now, anti-synergies also exist as well, right? So you also got items that have the same unique passives, like Lifeline on both Sterak's and PD, which doesn't necessarily mean you get no value. It will just take the one that gets the most value of the bigger shield, that sort of thing. You still get value, but it's just not really gold efficient. Now, lastly, guys, I want to quickly talk about runes and item alignment. You must always be aware of how your runes synergize and actually harmonize with items, because ideally they're actually trying to achieve the same goals in the same way. So let's actually take a look at a few examples, guys. So the first one, obviously sustained damage and attack speed is really good with Conqueror and Ravenous Hunter, because you're getting more damage off. You're stacking up the Conqueror faster, which means you actually get a lot more damage with Conqueror, which actually complements your healing as well. They all synergize together, okay? More attack speed, stacking up your Conqueror faster. You see a lot of burst damage items with Dark Harvest, right? Because you want to actually burst people down, get them below that threshold to actually get that stack. That's why you see, items like Spellbinder. Early spiking items with Airy and Scorch. If you have an item that spikes very early in the game that wants to push the pace of the game, you obviously want to complement that with earlier spiking runes like Scorch and Airy. You don't want to take that with scaling runes less so with scaling runes like Phase Rush or Dark Harvest. Presence of Mind with Archangels. Obviously, Archangels, you get more AP when you have a higher mana pool, and Presence of Mind also increases your maximum mana, so you get more AP with your Archangels. And there are many anti-synergies which you should now be, I guess, much more aware of, given you've seen this item video. If you've seen the rune video, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together and be like, okay, now I see what this item's actually trying to achieve, and now I know what this rune's trying to achieve. Now I can kind of, okay, this does not synergize, but this really synergizes very well, and kind of put 2 and 2 together, guys. So thank you for watching. I know this is a very long video, but I did want to do this video and get it out to help you guys really create and understand all these differing build paths, adapt your build within a game. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to join the Discord, ask away, or even just drop a comment below. Cheers.